Good to see you guys.
Morning, everybody. I'd like to call to session the Planning Board special meeting here in Council Chambers, May 19th, 9 a.m. We please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Seeing we have a quorum, I'd like to read the statement. Does any member of the Planning Board have a conflict of interest or the appearance of a conflict of interest with regard to any item on the agenda? And if so, please state so at this time. Sybil?
No.
No.
No for me?
No.
No as well.
Okay. Going to item number 2, amendment and or approval of the draft agenda. I do not have anything to change on the draft agenda. I would like to make a note for future reference that we include public comments at the beginning of the meeting. And the reason I might suggest it, and I'd like the rest of the Planning Board to consider this, even though we don't publish a specific agenda saying what we're going to be talking about at this specific meeting, interested citizens and particularly developers, they'll know exactly where we left off in the last meeting, and we'll be able to then ascertain what items we're going to be covering. And if they have a comment, I'd like to see them make those comments at the beginning of the meeting. Again, seeing that we do not have anybody present in the meeting right now, I'm not going to ask that the agenda be draft agenda be changed. Does anybody have any amendments to the present draft agenda in front of you? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to have a motion that the draft agenda before us be approved.
I so move.
I second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay, old business. We're going to jump right into the continuation of the Unified Development Ordinance audit. I have noted, hopefully correctly, that we ended with pools and hot tubs, section 7.14, and that we're now entering into 7.15, accessory structures to commercial use. Does that meet everybody's recollection?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, starting right off with the accessory structures. I wasn't sure whether we considered a pool as an accessory structure. We had discussed it under pools. I think we had said that a pool should not be an accessory structure, but how did you hear that, Wes?
We decided that pools, we don't want to count them as count them towards the limit,
Okay.
but they are currently defined as accessory structures, or what in my mind is an accessory use.
Mhm.
And as we draft the language, it will likely remain that way, but there's one thing that I'll need to work out with Chad on, how you handle a pool, for example, that is in an above ground deck attached to a house, and whether or not that's accessory or principal and some of the setback. But that's a very specific technical thing. But for all intents and purposes,
Okay.
we continue to regulate pools the same way they are now. There'll be just some nomenclature changes potentially.
But what about like a pool house, pool changing room, pool shower? That would be a separate structure, right?
That's
Not
what
part of the pool being the container of water.
Right. So, that's some of those semantic type items are what need to be properly addressed, because if you are going by the literal terms of the ordinance and there's a limitation on accessory structures, then I don't believe that the town necessarily wants to say that you can have a pool, but you can't have a little pool house associated with it on the deck. Are those one and the same? So that's where we've got to provide some language to you all and make sure that you're clear on what it is that's being allowed, because
But then wouldn't it be better to leave the two limitation in, but make sure that specifically the body of water is excluded as an accessory structure?
Well, what if you
Good
want to
job.
have a pool house in your deck,
Yeah.
and then you want to have a storage shed out back, and you want to have a hot tub on the deck, and that's why
Well, to me, the hot tub and the pool are
One of-
both containers of water. They're the same.
okay, but is the little pool house that's on the deck, is that associated with the pool, or is that a separate
It's
structure?
a structure. Because it'll be a structure.
I might not agree
Yeah.
with Ron. I
Yeah.
think it is, it's
Part of the
it's
pool.
ancillary to the pool itself.
Right.
It's,
And so that's where we'll provide some language and let you guys figure it out.
Well, is
I-
there some delineation between, I mean, this is we're talking about accessory structures for commercial use as
That
opposed
not
to
but
residential
Ron's
use.
going back to 714.
Yeah, I did kind of
Yeah.
bounce around a little bit because we were just.
all right, well, let's see
Sorry about that.
what you come up with. Ron, is that acceptable? See how he words it? Because
Yeah.
this isn't the final end-all
Mhm.
right now. It's,
Wes,
But-
if I can get you to make a note in the definition of structure, in the definitions,
Yes, I
it
know.
does call out
I know.
swimming pools specifically
Yep.
as structures.
Yes, I know, which
Now,
is
are we gonna-
problematic.
Are we going to be sensitive to the difference between an in-ground pool and,
That's what I just
he's going to work
alluded
on that.
to.
He already
Yeah.
said that.
Yeah.
A question I have for accessory structures for commercial use in 715A, we talk about until the construction of the main building has commenced. I don't know that we even have a definition for main building. I think principal structure really needs to be
Correct,
the
yeah.
wording in there.
Mhm.
And I agreed with your removal of D through G, Wes, on 715.
Mhm.
and where is the redundancy here?
We talk about screening in other areas, and we talk about setbacks for accessory structures in 6.
But specific to commercial use?
Yes.
Okay.
And then we talk about, I mean, any accessory structure, if it's in, if it needs to be built to state code, it's already going to be subject to that.
And its
already gonna be
location is already defined in 6.
It's already going to be, if it's in an AEC, it's going to be regulated by CAMA, and then if it's in a flood hazard, it's already going to be regulated by FEMA. So
And dumpster screening is already addressed.
that's
elsewhere,
correct. The
yes.
question I did have was on C about, to me, for one, I will say that this is an odd section in a lot of local governments. There's not necessarily a limitation on the number of structures that are in a commercially zoned tract. There may be out parcels that have other structures, and there's not necessarily a limitation on the number of accessory structures, so long as they meet the setback and things like that. This seems to me like this was just sort of put in here because that's
Because
what
of
it was.
residential.
That's right. Yep.
But I think the commercial is less sensitive than residential when it comes to objecting to accessory structures. In a residential neighborhood, I can
Right.
see the limit on it for sure.
Yes. Yep. So that and
So are we going to remove C or are we going to
That-
increase the number?
I would be my recommendation to remove it, and I would care to guess that we've got quite a bit of
Both the number and the square foot
That's
limitation
what,
you're talking about.
yes,
Because
yeah,
they're two separate things. You could take away one and leave the other.
sure.
You could take away the number and leave some sort of
Yeah.
limitation how much additional square foot you're adding.
Yeah. But a lot of times you'll have multiple principal operations, principal structures. I mean, I think this is there in error is what I'm getting at. And I would care to guess that it's not enforced, and there's plenty of iterations where this is, and you guys don't know, other than the fact that I'm telling you now.
How about if you do delete it with a note
Yeah.
that we know that there could be additional discussion
Yep.
on this as we get a chance to think
Yep.
about it. But at least if you delete it now, we won't forget to delete it.
Yep.
'Cause, I mean, what's the hazard in not having some restraint on accessory structures in a commercial use?
Well, I think it's an interpretation problem because let's say you had a hotel
Mhm.
and that they had a pool also in their hotel. That may be considered to be an accessory structure, or for all intents and purposes, someone could interpret that hotel as being part of the principal use in and of itself. It is a hotel, a resort. They've got a bar there. I could make the argument perhaps both ways.
So they might have an outside bar, a patio with a shelter.
Is that principal
gazebo.
use? What I'm getting at is we usually don't regulate the number of accessory structures for commercial businesses. They're usually all related to the principal, typically. You may have a storage shed out back or whatever it is, but oftentimes you have other kind of setback limitations, things of that nature. It's really up to you guys, but
Okay.
Let's see what you
Okay.
come up with, and by noting it, we can have another bite at it. Under 716, adult and sexually oriented businesses, I agree with you about bingo parlors because my grandkids like to play bingo. I don't know that it's adult. I have trouble with this whole section because it's so subjective as to what is sexually oriented, what is adult.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, we're under the assumption, first of all, that they're a legal business. I mean, so I'm not sure how you could even break this out legally anymore. I mean, if it's a legal business, I think the part about the being licensed practitioners or someplace, is that in this section or another one? That might be in another one, like where beauty shops are. Should be applied like universally. You have to have a proper licenses. The business and the technicians that are in there, but you get things like I don't know, is like a massage therapist in there? What's the difference between a spa and a and
licensing.
nowadays Sacred Willow. I mean, you could say that's a massage therapist. I mean, it's in Calabash, but it seems like this whole section is so subjective, as Peter said, and morally biased.
And 20 years ago, tattoo parlors were things that nobody wanted. Now, body art is more mainstream, and so I think. Do you have better wording from other?
Yeah. What I
sources?
typically do is we'll have an adult and sexually oriented business, and it's only related to adult and sexually oriented business, period. And it encompasses a number of different uses. It's fairly broadly defined. Let me see where your definition is. It may be pretty close to correct already.
It's adult bookstore, adult business, adult motion pictures.
So
adult
all
arcade.
of those things would be under one definition. It would say such things may include an adult arcade, adult bookstore, adult business, all these particular.
So it would be defined as an age-limited business. It's a business that can only be accessed by people of certain ages, over 21, over 18.
It is a sexually oriented business is what we're regulating here. Bingo parlor is gotten in here, and then the town has a definition of massage business that refers to massage parlors that have unlicensed practitioners.
Lap dances.
That would be a sexually
Okay.
oriented business.
Okay.
But I guess the distinction I get into is I could make the argument that, hey, I walk into a CVS and there's an entire aisle of Trojan products. Now, is that a sexually oriented business or no?
No.
Right. That's
You
what it gets also. I mean,
You also
I
can't.
guess
do
you kind of know what you don't want.
This-
Sort of. I mean, you don't want obviously no illegal businesses going on.
You also can't do it by age because ABC store restricts people. Tobacco shops restrict people.
Right,
by
Yeah,
age,
but
so.
That's why it's going to be retermed a sexually oriented business.
Let's-
That's typically how we handle it.
This is so subjective. We
Yeah.
could talk about this for an hour
Yep.
and
Yeah.
not move off the nickel.
Yes.
How about if we let Wes
Take a whack
do
at
some
it.
combinations of things and change it from adult to sexually oriented and see what he has.
And this would also relate back to the table of uses, right? Because
Yes.
these things would have to be, I mean, because we have like those whole lists on the table of uses seem to be all,
There will just be now one
Right.
sexually oriented business, and then it will include, you know, several of the other additional items that are already in the table.
Okay.
So we're going to attempt to consolidate this.
Yes, sir. And then pull out electronic gaming and bingo, for example, will be a separate item.
Okay.
It seems like those are just kind of shoved in here haphazardly.
And perhaps do a,
but I guess when we define that, we're still having these same
There will be that
distance.
separation requirement in place. Yes, sir. I mean, we can take them out if you would like, but
It doesn't hurt to have a definition in there, even if you don't use it.
We'll have a definition in here, but the use standards for the separation requirement is quite common to have those in place, and those are legal to do. And you can take them out, but I would recommend that you probably.
Because 1,500 feet's a long way.
It is.
I mean, I was trying. That's 5 football.
Yeah, but
fields,
the
right?
point of this is that we want to provide as a maximum protection for our citizens from being subjected if they have objections. So,
right.
and we're not saying they are banned.
Mhm.
Well,
You cannot say that.
But there was like, isn't one that 2 camping? I mean, if you have like a massage, a tattoo place, and a separate beauty shop that does party, aren't they required to be 1,500 feet apart? There can't be 2 adjacent that way. That seems well. Okay, maybe we just need to see what the new section looks like.
Yeah.
It just seems wildly restrictive on subjective viewpoints.
Agreed. Subjective is the key word here.
Yeah.
But I think our citizens would be pleased to see that there is significant restrictions on those kinds of businesses. If somebody wants to do it, they can go to Myrtle Beach.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not trying to stymie any
Yep.
great conversation, but
Yeah, I guess the one thing I would add is maybe a slightly more stringent separation between what are spa, quote unquote, massage businesses as opposed to.
well, it has to do with licensing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, I guess my preference is that you have to be licensed, not allowed on unlicensed.
hmm
To me, is a better way to break it down. If the state requires you to have some licensing or testing, whatever the state does, then to have the business here, you got to have that
Sure.
license. And that seems to be a more objective way to.
It's like for tattoo parlors, the state has requirements before they'll issue a permit. That somebody has to have certain training, certain
Right.
medical background,
Safety.
and that there has to be safety protocols. There has to be autoclaving of needles,
Right.
proper sharps. There's all kinds of things, and they have to be there on the premises so that anybody else can give a tattoo. I think those are
To me,
the
it's more.
restrictions we're looking for. If we can move on to agricultural, 717.
That's a big switch.
Yes, it is. I think we decided before that we need to have a better definition of what agricultural is, and I think we had addressed that in our zoning on Article 6. That there does need to be a better definition as to whether chickens and whether pigs can be pets or.
And we did discuss that and the deferring to only bona fide farms being allowed in the ETJ because you have to allow bona fide farms in the ETJ
Yes.
per statute.
Under churches and cemeteries, the only thing I could see is that we really don't have a definition of what a church, a house of worship is, a religious institution.
Yep.
There needs to be something. It can't be me deciding that I want to have the Church of Larkin in my garage.
Yes, that would be a home occupation, but we did in the earlier section say we'll rename this religious institution provided and provide a definition.
719, continuing care. We kind of talked about this under
Bedroom limitation.
uses. Was it uses?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've got moving in a good direction for continuing care, assisted living, adult, step down or step up, however you want to call it, facilities.
Care in place.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the 10-acre land area.
We reduced that, or that will be changed to 2 acres.
Okay.
Did we discuss that already?
Yes, sir.
I
Okay.
mentioned
thought
I
it.
we
got
had.
a note here and I didn't know where it came from
I
either.
had done that. I hadn't written the 2 down, but I had we've
Yeah.
changed this.
When I
10
drove
acres.
by the New Haven facility, I looked at that and I said, I don't think that's 10 acres. And, you know, they built a beautiful facility there right in Little River. And, so it felt like I was curious as to what was the acreage on that site.
I don't know which.
I don't know either. But if we've moved it to 2 acres, I think that's sufficient.
All right. Anything else in 19? That's all I had.
The one thing I want, structure limited occupancy to person age 60 years or older, the physically hand and their spouse, except for rooms, okay. This issue of 2 levels of service, do we understand? And it's what does that entail?
There's specific definitions for these things. I think continuing care has it in here, but basically, and I don't know the exact medical terms, but
Right.
you know, you go in and you have limited, you limited interaction with nurse. Nurse doesn't have to take care of you full time. When you reach a certain stage, you're pretty much bed bound. You got
Federally, it's tied to the 7 things
full time care.
the 7
Right.
daily activities you can either do or not do.
Right.
Where you get moved from,
Right.
you may be in a little house,
Whether
you're
there's
independent.
one out of
Yeah.
7 you
Yeah.
can or cannot
Yeah.
do, when you get
Yeah.
to like 3 that you cannot do,
Right.
then you're considered in a higher.
Yep.
And I don't remember all 7 of them.
My,
Mentally, we understand it, but
Yep.
there's a federal
Yes.
list.
And we've put the minimum of 2, which agrees with our definition.
Yeah, it includes at least 2 of the following: independent living in care, congregate care, and or nursing care. So again, where you may be independently living, and then once you reach a certain stage, you may move next door into, the nursing care.
well, I mentioned this because in the research that I did when we had to deal with this with my family, there are institutions that only provide a single level of care. There are continuing care facilities that they would quote themselves as being independent.
Yeah,
living.
those are nursing home type facilities.
No, they're
No, the
not.
opposite he's
They're
talking about.
actually
okay.
before.
Independent.
they're
Okay.
much before.
Okay.
And then
They'd just be a single family development then, for all intents and purposes.
no, not really. I mean, they are multifamily. They're individual apartments in a clustered single building
Okay.
with limited nursing care, but are advertised as continuing care, independent living.
Well, if they only then that we would term that probably as a multifamily use.
That's exactly what we did. We
Yeah.
just did that a few
Yeah.
months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It went to
My
the Board of
previous state
Adjustment.
created a whole new definition called supportive care,
Yeah.
which put it between
hmm
We've dealt with that already
Total
very
apart-
specifically.
Yeah.
We've already dealt with that.
We've dealt with it very specifically. We could not call it a senior living facility. It's exactly what it was.
hmm
We couldn't call it that. It was a multifamily business. It was a multifamily building.
Sure.
But it was going to meet the standards.
Yep.
On top of that, outside the Board of Adjustments,
Is
outside
that
the case.
Just out here
No,
on Seaside.
It was
Another
up on
one?
Seaside
Yeah.
Road.
Okay.
They're doing 2 apartment buildings.
Yeah.
It's just 2 apartment buildings. But the standards that the developer's placing on it is you have to meet criteria of senior living over a certain
And that's
age.
fine. That's up to them.
I don't see any issues with 719 as we have it with the
Yep.
2 acres. However, there always is an issue with younger people living with grandma or staying with grandma. And the individual facility would need to have their own rules
Sure.
as to how to deal with that.
Yep.
Okay.
720, electric utility substation. We have a definition of public utility substations. And
This goes back to the discussion we had some time ago about how these are to be regulated, and that we were going to combine a number of them into one use
Mhm.
related to utilities.
Yes.
Mutually beneficial uses or whatever, some amalgamation of that, and that they would have standards but not necessarily be a special use permit.
We do not have a definition of public utility substations. I take that back.
There is, I recall there being a definition in here.
Well, I guess my
somewhere.
point is, why do we don't need to have something separate for electrical.
I
We-
agree.
We can have something that's probably why my note here is civil. That's, I wrote that.
Right, we're just,
Jerry?
Excessive noise, who determines, what's the benchmark for excessive noise?
That would be where
There is a noise ordinance.
if there is a noise ordinance, but
I know later on it's in there, but
yeah, if we put this in just had it as supplemental standards, we would just say that they would have to meet. We probably would take out noise. If it remains a special use permit, then the applicant would prove to the Board of Adjustment that what their definition of excessive noise was appropriate.
Well, in fact, our noise ordinance is weak. We'll get to that, but it has to do with after 10 p.m.
Yep.
It
It
doesn't
wouldn't
have to
relate to
do
this.
with noontime
Yeah.
on a Sunday.
Yeah. Well, the other issue too is, and it may not be specific to utility substation, but there are other facilities that, for instance, if there's a power outage, they're going to fire up some diesel generators, and those things are going to make a hell of a lot of noise. You know, how do we handle? Is there a way to handle that? I mean, typically noise ordinances are done at a dB level at the property line. I don't know if that's how
That is where
Okay.
ours is.
So, you know, that's something we particularly when we get to the telephone towers. So, I don't know if that's something that we need to address or no.
I don't know that you can address it as clearly when it's a state of emergency.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, and that's right. If there's a state of emergency, then there's certain things that sort of go out the window in terms of regulation. So
Do you have any specifics, Jerry, about the noise?
no, it needs to be addressed.
subjective,
more-
yes, yeah.
A little more clearly.
So you were thinking of maybe tying it into the noise ordinance, although it
Yeah.
would be tied in.
It would be
By-
anyways. I was thinking that it would come out based on our discussion that we're not going to regulate certain of these things as special use permits anymore.
Okay. Entertainment and amusement, 721. A question I have for staff: do we really have any of these that are non-conforming?
Any arcades? So.
Used to be one on the island, but that's been gone for years.
The only
Yeah.
one that comes close to this would be the old miniature golf place up there.
Mavericks.
Yeah, but I don't think it's in operation currently. So that the use might be to the point where it's.
I know neighbors have complained about that.
But
They put a 10 o'clock
it's
rule on
more. Yeah, it might be a curfew thing. It might be it's not operational thing, and it's just. But I don't know if it's non-conforming because that use is allowed in MB1, so I don't think so.
Does anybody have any comments on 721? I mean, I have all kinds of marks in my section here, but it's subjective.
what's 7? Is there some conflict? I made a little note. I got to read my own note. 7.16H10 versus S.
And I'll say that
Hold on, I'm trying to figure out the hell I was doing.
some of this was related to the issue
Oh,
that we had with sweepstakes, and I think that some of this language came in here several years ago as a result to regulate that.
Okay.
Regulate what? I'm sorry.
Sweepstakes.
Sweepstakes.
Okay.
So, I mean, this to me is purely kind of like it is an arcade. This would not be an instance where, say, a brewery came in or something like that, and they had a couple machines in there, arcade machines. This would be a
Well, they allow up to 5, so
So a bar or
Well, and then I
Well-
noted, I don't know if we have a conflict here or not, that 7.16H says you can't have no more than 10. And then this one in the beginning says with 5 or more. So we're saying 5
Electronic
or more, but
gaming.
no more than 10.
Electronic gaming is a separate defined item, but these are conflating. Electronic gaming will be pulled out. It'll be its own use now. It'll have its own supplemental standards.
So this would be like,
Pool tables.
I'm trying to think. Well, it could be a non-money paying.
If it helps you, the electronic gaming will more federally regulated as well.
Right, because
These-
gambling.
Yeah, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle pinball machine is not.
Yep.
Right, because you
Federated.
take your quarter and take your
Yeah.
50 cents and it's gone. You don't have a chance of getting any back.
A quarter, you're dating yourself.
I know. I'm sorry. That's why I tried to change it quickly.
right. But this would not impact, because it says here you can't serve alcohol in any of these places. So this is separate from any bar or
That's how I would look at it. And we will have a commercial recreation use, commercial indoor commercial recreation and outdoor commercial recreation. And there may be components of this that get put in to address the indoor commercial recreation. I think a lot of this was related again to the sweepstakes that were occurring in the early 2010s, and people were having a problem with regulating it.
Well, I'm curious as to why, because I know the businesses in Ocean Isle that have electronic gaming in them serve beer. So
Yeah.
why? Now they're kind of multi-use of the pier.
Don't they have separate rooms?
See, that's where I was saying we'd have to figure out what the principal use is. If it's a brewery or a bar and they just so happen to also have some additional machines, but if it's fully dedicated to fully dedicated to sweepstakes or gaming or arcade. The problem was back in the day that these folks that have the sweepstakes machines, they would say, I want to open up an internet cafe or whatever it was, and it was the only thing that was in there was electronic gaming machines.
Maybe to help you out, Richard, a Chuck E. Cheese would be a restaurant.
Yep.
What?
A Chuck E. Cheese
Yes.
would be a restaurant.
What about a Dave and Buster's?
Restaurant.
And then David Buster's
That's
would be a
considered
restaurant.
'Cause
Yeah.
they serve food.
Because
Yeah.
it's the primary, they have
Yeah.
to show a certain percentage
But
of
but in that,
business
Dave
is
and
based
Buster's is
upon that.
primarily a gaming
item.
place
It's a
by
restaurant.
square footage for sure.
It's a restaurant. I would deem it a restaurant.
Mm.
But the pier in Ocean Isle.
That would be a peer
So
use.
okay.
Let us take a look at this in its relationship to electronic gaming. I do think that there are some conflicting items in here between electronic gaming and entertainment. I don't believe that you guys have, my understanding from a policy standpoint, unless I'm mistaken, is if someone has a brewery or a whatever and they put a couple arcade machines in there or a pool table, I don't think you guys have an issue with that. Okay.
The only example I really know, there used to be one down in Myrtle Beach at the Pavilion. It was strictly just a square footage place with arcade games. I think the closest one that's still available is if you go to Carolina Beach.
Mhm.
They have a walk-in arcade, or walk-in. Yeah, that's what I would consider what we're talking about now.
Yep. Old school.
Old school. Ski
All right.
Okay, cool.
Moving on to fishing piers. I had no issues with 722 as worded. Just the arcade type of devices, we've just beaten that up with 721 that we've talked about. 723 golf courses. I had an issue with B3 in 723. It talks about parking lots needed, unless I'm misreading it, needed to be screened for noise and visibility from the street. We have a whole bunch of non-conforming situations there. I can see it screening from residential properties. That's really what we want to protect is individual residents.
And if it was a new parking lot, they would be required to screen themselves anyways, similar to other provisions in Article, I believe 10.
Yeah, from residences.
Um,
Like we have no screening here in our parking lot behind me
yep.
for the street,
We
but we do have screening.
we will. It has not been installed yet, but there is
Okay.
screening all the way around.
Good.
Yeah, no, it just hasn't been installed yet.
Okay.
So,
6, B6 in this item. They're talking about signs exceeding 10 foot in height. I think we need to have uniformity with the signs that we've just talked about, the monument signs and golf course signs.
Perfect. All right, let's go back. I'm sorry I wasn't here last meeting about golf course and length. What was discussion? What was
Well,
the
your
discussion?
definition that you came up with, which was kind of vanilla, but that's all that exists. I think.
It's 6,000 yards here on this.
Yeah.
Now, is there a conflict of, we talked about executive golf courses being a minimum of 4,000?
I think I'd like to adopt your definition and under definitions and then revise golf courses here
Yeah.
accordingly.
And that
Because the intent was to have big golf courses and allow
Yeah.
par
Executive.
3, executive, whatever Jerry's right terminology was fine with me.
yeah, no, me too.
Yeah. I mean, you really brought out that there
That was
one doesn't
just-
really exist.
Right.
Wes, were you privy to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're going to deal with it in definitions under championship golf courses.
Yep.
Which we may need to change the word championship.
Yep.
And we're going to change the 6,000 foot here,
So forth.
and also integrate our monument sign text amendment that's going before town council, that town council has approved now.
So,
To take out the 10 foot.
so 6 has to be changed to say they just can have the monument sign per the monument sign regulation
Yes. Does
without separate dimensions and stuff.
that make sense, Wes?
Yep.
Because these two numbers in here don't agree with what we just approved, right?
Yeah,
Right. Not at all.
Well, I forgot what we approved, 8 feet?
8 by 20.
8 feet by 20. and
25 feet by 8
Just
foot
the
tall.
Town
actually
council
changed.
expanded that to 25, passed it, so.
Miniature golf courses. I was going to say we don't have one, but yes, we do. Well, we have a footprint of one.
That area there is not an acre, is it?
Pardon me?
For the one that we do have that's not operational, this says it has to be a minimum of 1 acre. Is that an acre?
Well, if you
From
count
when it was built,
Yeah.
I guarantee you that standard was not there.
But
Okay.
if you can count the golf course, the parking lot, the restaurant, it's all owned by the same.
But it's subdivided out. There's different lots there. But again, this is going for new. If a miniature golf place came in now new, this is what that would apply
So he
to.
could revive that one? Even though we are going to, at some point in time, in Article 8, talk about nonconformity.
It might
And
not
if
be non-conforming because you got to remember the use is allowed
1 year.
in the MB1. Even if it's gone a year,
Yeah.
use is allowed in MB1.
Okay.
And I think also the parking was an issue from the get-go.
That was before
But,
my
I
time.
mean, whether it's changed or not, it was an issue in the beginning.
I'm not saying there won't be any non-conforming standards applied to it, but it would be a use that is allowed in MB1.
All right, we'll see how, when we talk about the Article
Okay.
8, how that,
Do you
Bells
want to
together.
revise the minimum acreage or leave it at 1 acre?
We revise it up or down.
It's up to you. Do you want to,
Have
our
more-
miniature golf courses, you want to something that you,
An acre
did-
seems to be plenty.
Yes. Yes.
why do we need to define it?
Yeah, why do we need one? I guess why do we need one period?
the minimum acreage?
Yeah.
I believe this was put in place to limit future minimum miniature golf courses. It's hard to find an acre tract or someone willing to.
In a business,
Yes.
commercial zone.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
you can leave it as is, or you can take the minimum out. It just depends on whether you want to encourage them or discourage them.
I don't know. Do we?
Acres, that's not an acre there, I can tell you that. I don't know. What do you guys think? Anybody have
So it's
a burning
40,
desire? to
43,000 square
change it?
foot's an acre, right? 40.
No, I think it's fine.
Well, I mean, I guess the question is, do we want to discourage them?
Well, that 1
My
acre discourages
sensibility
it.
is that we want to encourage them.
Yeah,
So-
I don't know which way you want to go. It just
From
it just seems like that's
We,
a
we are a destination, and I have no problem with having a miniature golf course, and I don't want to see us hinder the chance to have one because we've set this specific number
that we
where they
talked-
might have 3/4 of an acre.
We
or-
talked about, this went back to the conversation we had about living space above commercial.
Yeah,
And,
because
I
we
mean,
don't
it
want a
happens-
miniature golf
and
course
we-
like the ones in Myrtle Beach where they've got a 2-engine plane hanging in the sky.
Right, but, we talked about this in the BB1. It's like, it becomes one of those things where I say, if they could figure out how to put it in a box.
because
There's too many other things that
Because
make
it had-
a lot more money that they could put in a very expensive real estate on a
And it-
BB1.
And being seasonal at best,
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
So
That's-
you don't want to
that's-
hinder,
And they're limited to a
Investment.
16-foot height anyway, so.
So get rid of the
Minimum
acreage
1 acre.
threshold.
get rid of it, or should we reduce it to half? Well,
I would
because
say just get rid of it.
just get rid of it.
Yeah.
If they could fit it, they could fit it.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't care.
That's up to you all, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, let's see what council says about it. Because again, we all need to understand that the 1 acre is not going to go away. It's just going to be struck out.
Yep.
And so as we go through it again, we can see what has been struck out and not get another chance to,
Because that's like 4 lots, 4 10,000 square foot lots.
right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of land. For,
Mhm.
Yes.
right.
News racks. Wes has asked us to consider removing this section.
Mhm.
Yeah, except right now what we have is pretty weak because it says a maximum of 6 racks. How big is a rack?
Great question.
It's.
We're not in New York City.
No, and it's the only places that we really have them are Food Lion. The outfitter could put some out there with some brochures in it, but I think he'd rather put stuff out there that he can market.
This I believe is as though it was a principal use, if I recall.
Yeah, it would be a standalone, so you wouldn't be able to regulate how many
Yep.
racks Food Line has. It's a grocery store.
This assumes that someone is going to just put a news rack on a
Corner.
corner,
Like
which
a 1990s New York City
yeah,
pop-up news rack with magazines and
Yep.
your
But
daily
what about-
tabs.
Yeah, that's unlikely.
The Sunoco station
Nobody
has,
said, but not
newspaper
an
racks.
accessory structure. If someone had it, no, it wouldn't happen
This is outdated.
anymore. It's
yeah.
outdated, right?
I mean, I read my paper.
The Sunoco
this-
station has 2 news racks out front. Now, that's not Sunset Beach, though.
Say that again.
The Sunoco
but
station.
that's a different thing than what this is.
Yeah.
That,
This is like the primary.
this would be
The
the
parcel would
principal
have
use.
just one function as a news
Yeah.
rack,
Correct.
Yeah.
and that's like
That's it.
Yeah.
not
All right.
likely.
We're
I
not
think
in
we
the
agreed,
90s.
we don't need
Let
it.
it go.
Outdoor displays, which is kind of the same thing.
Outdoor display
Very
is,
different.
is similar, but your outdoor display is problematic.
We do not enforce outdoor displays anyway. There are places, I mean, we obviously had the exception for Food Lion Christmas tree sales, seasonal sales like that. But there are other places that have furniture stuff out front with price tags on it.
hmm
And some of them get removed at night and some of them don't.
But being in the UDO, what good is it? I mean, because
that
because no one's going to put that on their plan saying,
well, this
here's
is-
our store and here's our sidewalk, and here is on our sidewalk where we're going to put up merchandise.
well, they don't, but
They
this is-
don't. They're just going to show the building and the sidewalk.
Well, technically, they should be getting a permit, through the town to do this, similar as any zoning permit to have outdoor display. And there are 2 separate items in my mind: outdoor display and then outdoor storage. But this, if this is something that I think it's something that you need to have in your ordinance. Enforcement is always an issue no matter what you do, but it needs to be in here, I think.
I think
Well-
it would be unsightly for somebody to store stuff in a commercial setting, but because
I will
it would
say this
detract from the,
from a staff standpoint. Your outdoor display is probably your less restrictive one. Your outdoor storage of merchandise is your more restrictive one, because you're exactly right. You don't want people just storing. It gets really problematic when you get into uses like automobile industries that have storage of merchandise and stuff like that, of junk cars. I know that gets into whole nother subject, but in my experience, you look at you do separate them out. There are two different entities.
yes, we do.
Yeah, and then so if it helps you out, the storage of merchandise overnight, your outdoor one is the more restrictive one you look at.
Right. So like Wes said, separating into an outdoor
Yes.
display that's only out during regular business hours and then removed.
Yeah.
You could alter that 50% to a lower
Because
number.
we have a couple businesses inside the town. One I just dealt with a few months ago that built a patio, puts their storage outside, and he brings it in and out every single day. It's not, and that would be an outdoor display.
Well, the furniture, the outside yard display store next to Walgreens does it, but he brings them in every night.
he does.
He
Hey.
follows this ordinance.
So yeah,
Yes, that's the great example. The other, now, if he was getting in shipments and packing them outside on the side of his building or in the back, that would be your definition of outdoor storage.
Storage, right? 'Cause it's
That's
permanent.
Well, also, he
two
was selling
different-
a truck there, and we don't want to be specific, obviously, to anybody, but I take issue with commercial businesses taking advantage of traffic in front of their store and having a for sale sign on a vehicle, which has nothing to do with their business.
Correct.
Um,
So I guess the first thing we're talking about is, as Wes said, is separate
You gotta
outdoor
separate.
displays.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which would be not discouraged, I guess, would reasonable. The one they're removed.
right. You
Only
just
out
need
there
to
in
make
regular
sure
business
that
hours.
it's not scattered about everywhere.
I would be open
which it
maybe
says here. Yeah.
Maybe to be some further limitations on that 50% might be a bit
Yeah, I
high.
think you hit it right at the nail right on the head when you said reasonable,
Right.
and with the outdoor storage. And I
Right.
think
And
if you
then
keep
storage
that-
being separate, that where we're discouraging, where no, you're not
Yep.
putting a warehouse out front. You're
Yep.
It's only a temporary display that has to be removed. When you close the store, you remove everything.
Yeah.
That 50% includes a whole bunch of different stores, so you got to get those people to
Yeah.
get together. That 50% is going to be very difficult to
Yeah.
evaluate. If you have 5 stores in a row, the 50% includes all of them as a conglomerate, not individually. There is a section somewhere in here that allows Christmas seasonal.
Yes.
it's not
Temporary
seasonal,
uses.
Yeah.
or like Food Lion at Christmas, because obviously they can't bring Christmas trees in every.
Yes, sir.
Chat, on the outside of the outfitters, there's a 20-foot, I think it's a 20-foot container, shipping container.
Mhm.
If you're looking at the building to the right, is that storage?
I would say
Gear-
I would deem it storage. Yeah, I mean the other thing is that
How
you
long
don't.
has that been there?
That's a great question.
That's probably
Because the other thing is
Supposed to
you know
be.
those things become okay, out of sight. Put them in the back. It's problematic when they take up parking spaces, because the parking is deemed use of the building, and you put a storage facility, you put one of those Connex containers taking up 3 parking spaces. Well, that takes away your
Yeah.
required parking. So it's reasonable stuff like that you put on top of these things. You can allow them.
But with the
Um,
reconstruction of that building, is it not a roadway that goes behind the building now?
Reconstruction of it
In other words, they're going to add the 9,000 square foot.
separate.
So it's totally
It's
separate.
totally separate.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're
Totally
not
separate
connected.
lot. Totally
So they're
separate.
not going to. All right.
Yeah.
They're connected in the front.
But not
Not in the back.
Right.
All right, was your question answered? All right, did we finish with 26?
So
Now we're on to 27, package treatment plants. Do we have any package treatment plants?
I mean, you could, but we don't probably.
Is a package treatment plant the same thing as people used to have in their front yard when their lots wouldn't
No.
hurt?
A package treatment plant would be like, for example, if you guys didn't have sewer currently, and someone built Sea Trail, and they brought their own smaller wastewater treatment plant to serve just that neighborhood. Those
Wouldn't that be covered under Brunswick County?
That's right. So that's why I've got
Right.
got the comment here. Confirm the allowance of package treatment plants. You know, in my mind, they should not be permitted. But we do have some communities that are facing sewer capacity issues, and so there's been pressure of the development community to allow them to put in a package treatment plant because they don't have enough capacity to hook up to county or municipal. I would recommend that you do not allow them, and that those folks have to wait for capacity because they can become problematic.
Right.
So
We don't have,
how would we address it? We wouldn't put minimum, we just say they're not allowed?
Yeah,
in the table of use, it wouldn't
and
be
in
allowed.
your general code,
Right.
general code, it would specifically say where we talk about water and sewer.
So all of this has to come out of here then,
That would be my recommendation.
with a note they're not allowed.
Sybil?
My question, because I'm not a plumber, don't have a plumbing degree, a packaged plumbing plant, is that serves a neighborhood, or it's not like a single person, you know, the ones who
Yep.
their land doesn't perk and they
It's
put
not
that thing
it's,
up?
It's not a septic system. It would be, it may serve 100 homes or
Okay,
200
okay.
homes.
Thank you, I just
Yeah.
wasn't clear on that.
Because septics are still allowed.
Well,
Do we have any septics adjacent to lakes?
They're,
there may still be some
There's
in
some
the
septic
ETJ.
out to the ETJ out
Yeah.
toward where
some
Sybil
people
lives.
have not opted
I
to,
have septic,
Yeah.
everybody in my neighborhood has septic.
Yeah.
Because
me
there
too.
are step systems, cavetats, that treat septic before allowing it to go into a lake.
I don't know.
A lake?
I mean,
Yeah.
Sea trail.
it's ground infiltration, but I don't. I'm not sure about what
I wouldn't
you're
like that.
referring to.
Previous job.
Well, I know there are those step systems that are larger sort of septic facilities.
In some places, if you have a
Yeah.
septic near a body of water,
Yep.
after the septic, you have to have a step system to treat that, aerate
Mhm.
that
Yep.
cavitat, a little
Talking about a
aeration
leach
plant.
field?
Yeah.
Huh?
More of a leach field?
Well,
No,
it's actually
this
a
is-
mechanical device.
Yeah.
he's talking about an aeration.
Yeah.
Tank
Oxygen.
that so that
oxygenation.
the liquid, the water, the treated water that enters the lake is
Yep.
So
cleaned, aerated.
the town does not regulate either one. We don't regulate the capacity. We don't regulate the sewer hookup. We also don't regulate the septic system. All done by Brunswick County Utilities and the Brunswick County Health Department.
Now, will Brunswick County allow me to build a house on a vacant lot and put a septic system in brand new? I don't think they
We need to
will.
go back and look at your code, but I believe if you're within a certain distance, it requires you to
Tie in.
To tie in, yes. Yep.
But an existing septic system is allowed to continue on until it needs major renovation.
Well, there's also setbacks that come with that. So if you're on a 7,500 square foot lot, you want to put a septic system. When you do have sewer capability, let's say for that example, might not have any room.
You wouldn't be able to meet the requirements.
Mhm.
Yeah. But
But in existing homes, so for instance, I think my lot's 8,000 feet, and it's, we're still on a septic.
you're still on septic. Yeah. So you would have difficulty. You're going to have to get, a good old boy to fix your system and not get it permitted.
Yeah, anything you get permitted, you'd have to connect to the town.
To the county.
Because you don't, your new environmental health
We'll
permit is
blame
going to
that on
require a
one
repair
county.
area that's going to be larger than you
What
have.
would I need it permitted for? I mean, I call the guy, he comes, he cleans it out.
Well,
That's fine, but if you put in a new one, technically,
Oh,
you're
okay,
supposed
yeah,
it's
never-
expensive to have them
Replace
pump
it,
it,
not just pump it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
have a suck back come
Yeah.
in and pump it
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
all the time.
yeah.
All right, can we move on to 728? Is that, everybody okay with that? Public utility substations, which I believe is very similar to
Yeah.
what we talked about with the electrical, and we were
Yeah.
going to try to
Consolidate.
consolidate them.
Yes.
Before we move to the yeses, since this is alphabetical, a point that I talked about earlier, just we don't have any supplemental regulations from restaurants or restaurants that serve alcohol. And my feeling is we should, So do we have just a point of note to consider adding a
Yes.
restaurant or a restaurant either separate or with serving alcohol?
You lost me.
We don't have a supplemental regulation for restaurants.
Oh, okay.
And I think we
understand
should.
what you mean.
Oh, so
Because this is alphabetical, right? I mean, we're moving from the P's to the S's now.
Yep.
And
our last
there is
meeting-
no R restaurant or restaurant alcohol serving that has any supplementals, and I think we should think about whether we do it or not. But I think it should be at least looked at.
We agreed that we'll put in supplementals for restaurant, at least in draft form, for you guys to opine over.
Right.
So there will be some.
Good point. Okay. All right, 729 is storage facilities. Again, we need a definition of a storage facility. I don't see one in our current paperwork. We have a storage unit, self-service.
Yep.
But we don't have any. What is a storage?
Yeah, I've got a recommendation there that about self-storage, and then really I think what you need is a salvage yard type of a use, and then you also have your self-storage, which is your mini storage or whatever you want to.
Would you delineate them by like enclosed versus like an open yard type?
Well, so for self-storage, when we put the supplemental and the definition in here, we'll have to determine whether or not you want to also allow outdoor storage on that self-storage. Some self-storage only allow enclosed, other allow enclosed, and then you maybe park a vehicle or an RV or boat,
right.
whatever it may be. And then salvage yard is totally different thing. Also a storage facility, but it's for junk. So
Well, it's probably highly unlikely that any of those things are going to be built within our municipality. Land is too valuable.
Yep.
But I can see that we need to protect ourselves from something happening like that.
I wouldn't say it's no much such as protecting. It's having good standards
right.
Okay.
put in there.
Okay. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And I guess the objective of those standards would be to persuade people to build those kind of facilities upstream a little bit.
well, the salvage yard will have very strict regulations, but self-storage, you may have requirements, for example, for outdoor storage that it be fully behind all the buildings, so you don't see the vehicles when you're driving by the street. The front of it has landscaping, etc. So for all intents and purposes, it looks like any other commercial.
Could we say?
Building.
Could we prohibit outdoor storage? Yes, you can build a self-storage facility.
Yes, you could.
Contained, but you would not be allowed to park RVs.
Yep.
And so could we say none here because of the size of the town?
Self-storage,
Mhm.
that would be a tough sell.
Would it? Okay.
Yeah,
That's
I
what
mean,
was
I think
thinking.
it limits business owners from use of their property.
Right.
It's,
You guys can put it in here. It'll be up to Grady to to sort it out.
It's on. I don't know.
I will say that I'll kind of say this that when you have your big boy toy storages type facilities, looking at them in the past and dealing with them in past uses, I think they're much more acceptable and usable if they're inside one of those facilities, such as outdoor,
Right.
versus having them on a vacant lot. And
like
having
Sea
them
Trail
like that.
doesn't allow an RV in your driveway, so
So-
people have to have a place to put it.
Exactly.
So I
Right.
think properly designed, properly regulated
Again,
outdoors for toys, RVs, boats, etc., is better off than people trying to sneak them into the woods or whatever.
yes, and I think that goes back to just having good standards.
Right.
It's because that's exactly right. Sea Trail and other HOAs, you cannot park a boat. They get as restrictive as they want to, where they got to have some place to go. So
We-
Well, I mean, there's facilities like ample storage
Yeah, there's one being built right down the road toward
Yeah.
Ocean Isle on the left.
Yeah,
It's huge.
it's enormous and it's tacky.
One of the
Sorry.
things that we need to address, I think, is the definition of junk boats,
And it's done
RVs. Junk is
That's getting fixed, and I'll address that. You can,
well, as long if you're fixing it, we
yeah,
won't
if Lisa
waste
wants to
time.
take 5 seconds and speak on that, but
That's in the
Registered,
nuisance code.
that's in the nuisance code.
in nuisance code.
That's the new regulation because the town.
I think you just turned it off.
Oh, we abandoned vehicles.
Yes,
Yep.
Okay.
those ordinances will be adopted by the council June 6th.
Okay.
That would handle all of that.
So-
Nuisance, junk vehicles, abandoned vehicles.
If they'll
Housing.
cross-reference it with junk, we don't have to change junk here.
So
Good.
are we in agreement that we would allow for housed self-storage, sheltered self-storage, but not allow parked vehicles, or do we, I mean, you make an excellent point. I mean, in many of the HOAs, you can't park your vehicle there. But it seems to me there's plenty of facilities that provide that kind of service within a 5-mile radius.
I would rather deal with a facility because in Pender County, I had to deal with people wanting, hey, I have a vacant lot, not doing anything with it.
But
Can I just put a gate up?
we would not, we would not permit, I don't believe the intent would be to permit standalone outdoor storage, but I think you typically, similar to anything else, you got to allow for it somewhere. So what you would do ideally is allow for it on an already that has enclosed, but it's just fully screened behind the rear of the structures. Ideally, you don't even know that it's there unless you're looking at an aerial.
Okay.
Would be the standard.
Because I'm thinking of ample storage, and when you drive into that facility, the RVs and the boats are behind the first building structures that are. So okay, all right.
I mean, you could put a stipulation in, they have to be X amount of feet off the road.
Yep.
You know, they have to be additional buffered, you know, that type thing. So,
Okay. Sybil, are you comfortable with that?
Sure.
Okay.
All right, the next item, telecommunications towers. I think we're all aware of a Board of Adjustment hearing which beat this to death. Just for my own edification, I understand a monopole to be self-supporting with no guy wires.
Yep.
And that a tower is something with guy wires. I don't know if it needs to be said if that needs to be said in here or not, but
it's also, you know, probably the way you get onto that and you go back to the whole thing, there's not a lot of lots left, big lots left.
Yeah.
They have to have a fall radius. They have to be engineered to be able to fall within a certain area.
yes,
They can't just lay down on somebody else's
50% of their
property,
height or something
you know,
like
that
that,
type
yeah.
thing.
Now, I want to talk a little bit about this because I look at this and, you know, these are extremely stringent requirements, which usually means not in my backyard. So I'm curious as to where this level of detail came from. And here's my concern.
well, just to add on to your thing and then please continue, I can put a 34-foot tall antenna in my backyard
Right.
right now
Mm-hmm.
because it can't be over 35 feet.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, to speak more generally, okay, when you look at households, 75% of households that are 75-year-old households have 75% landline penetration. 30 and below, landline penetration is 6%. This is going to create a significant public safety issue because the cell phone coverage in this area is very bad. And when you have an emergency situation where power's down, Wi-Fi doesn't work, I need to make an emergency phone call, and my phone is a brick because we don't have adequate tower coverage and we don't have adequate network coverage, you're going to create some real issues in terms of public safety. I'm not sure.
Richard, I think we've, again, not to stop you,
Right.
but please continue, but I think we've had this situation come up before the Board of Adjustment, and we found with those specific concerns being
Right.
addressed by the Board of Adjustment, we found ways to allow them as in a very narrow
It was an unpleasant
locations.
hearing, and I understand what you're saying, but I think that you would need to perhaps advocate for those as a citizen before the town council on modifications from a policy standpoint, unless the rest of the board is in favor of loosening the wireless standards.
Well, I mean, the person who wrote this, I mean, it's very detailed and very rigid and
I
very
would-
specific.
And if you look at the rest of our
There's
body of work
ones
here,
that are much more stringent than this, I will say.
yes,
I think that this has some semblance of balance. Some of our communities have a 20-page long wireless telecom
Well, Chad,
article.
my question is, I know there's a new tower that's supposed to go up by the Regency. What is the status of that, and when will that
Can we
capacity?
stay on
Yeah.
UDO, please? We could
I
drift on that.
I'll get you an
History.
update before we leave.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I'll
mean,
do that.
I'm perfectly willing to have this as an
Yeah, but I
off-channel
will
conversation.
say this: out of all the big, bulky, non-usable, kind of more restrictive text in here, this is kind of language that gets passed along from the copycat business,
Right.
and this is pretty standards.
Well,
on
my
telecommunications.
question is, who's generating it? I mean, I get the fact that this is
A lot of
standard.
it can
I
be
mean,
general.
there's specific wireless consultants that assist with administering and regulating telecom. I am not an expert at it. I have folks that I will call on from time to time, but this is pretty run of the mill. We went real into the weeds on it with the last application that came before here, and the applicants met the standards. I think that the community was not excited about it, but they did everything they could in the confines of the ordinance and to conceal the tower, which is what you want, and they still were able to build it.
One of the things that I think is a housekeeping matter on E and F in 7.30, it talks about setbacks, but it references divisions A and B, and then in F, it's A through C. Both of those should really be C and D, because C and D address setbacks. A and B do not address setbacks.
Okay.
I mean, just
Yep.
reread it with that in
Yep.
mind, and maybe I'm wrong there, but
The
I
only
have a question on D,
okay.
on the fall, in reading the case,
Mhm.
and maybe I don't, because this is talking about property line. So the fall distance of a tower,
Mhm.
is that to the property line or to the dwelling? I'm not sure.
It would be property lines.
Mhm.
So it must fall within their property.
Yes, sir.
Mhm. And they're designed to do that.
Right. Well, I guess, except I just put a,
That fall radius would probably have to be X amount of feet away from a property line. I've got it pictured in my head of what it normally looks like, but I don't know the specifics of the one we got approved a few months
so I
ago.
guess I want to make sure it's written such that whatever the PE says, that it falls,
Mhm.
it will not cross any property line.
Correct.
Then the second note on my mind, do we want to include a bit more in that?
I think
From a policy standpoint.
from a
that-
policy standpoint,
Because obviously, property line, you could
I'll
have
be-
a fence at your property line, you could have cars at your property line.
I'll be completely honest. Out of
That-
everything in this book,
Yeah.
Section 730 is probably one of the best written sections that we have.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
very,
Well, I'm not saying it, but I'm just, from a policy standpoint, do we want to include there a little, I would call it maybe a margin of safety? I mean, you could do I remember on the one, the monopole, it had a break point, and then the break point,
Mhm.
Yeah.
you could obviously you just sit there, but if there's a wind event happening and things are happening, I mean, does it actually just fall like that, or does it fall, bounce, and move? Whether we should have
I think it
some
goes,
additional margin of safety in feet.
Do you want to add 10 feet, 25 feet?
Well, I don't know. I was thinking 5 or 10 in my
Okay.
mind as an additional margin of safety, so the citizens at least can be confident that if there is a disastrous event during a wind event, that the thing isn't going to fall on or debris into their property or.
Well,
I think if we go to the property line, I mean, we can't make this for everything that could possibly happen.
because if it helps Ron, it does come in. These things have to come in with an engineered stamp on them.
but there's a factor of safety. As a professional engineer, I'm going to include a factor of safety in my analysis for fall area to begin with. So you're putting a factor of safety on a factor of safety.
Well, and
I don't know that we were
on a
really
particular
should
one
do that.
in question, they looked at it had a break point, an elbow
Yes.
for the brake. Okay, and all he did was take that, put that line out, and made it a radius. Okay, and it fell within there. I mean, I'd seen what he did. I'm
Yep.
also a PE, by the way.
Yeah.
So, but which is true, but in real life is sometimes more disastrous
I
than
know. I mean,
theoretical life.
it was discussed on.
I wasn't at the meeting, so maybe this all was
Yeah.
discussed.
It's on YouTube.
It was discussed on whether
Get a six-pack
So
of
in
beer.
my
it
mind-
could detach and all these sort of things at length.
Right. So if everybody says that's fine, as long as the guy says it doesn't ever cross the property line, and if there's a fence there or cars parked there or a garage there, and it does bounce or blow over, it's good enough. So be it. The insurance works it out.
Um,
and I'm not sure this applies here, are there, because a lot of the wireless carriers will take a supplemental structure and park a few antennas on that.
That's called co-location. It's in here. It's addressed.
like our water tower here by the
Yeah.
fire station.
Right.
One of the things I see on I here is that, and we I guess we get paid by the word. It says which was constructed after the effective date of this ordinance. I mean, isn't that understood? We say that time after time after time after
Yeah,
time.
that anywhere that's in there. Thank you, Pete. That doesn't need to. That's irrelevant, and I've made note of that in a couple other places.
I mean, and I'll go back to something Richard said. I don't know how to prevent it, but I wouldn't really want my next door neighbor, who might be a Citizens Band radio enthusiast, putting up a 35-foot tower on his property, 34 foot 11 inches. To me, I think he needs to go to somebody and get permission, and just like he would need to talk with neighbors within 200 foot of, there are things that we stipulate that involve the community before something that is unique and not commonplace be put in. But I don't know how to adjust. I don't know how to influence that here in our UDO without being overreaching.
Basically the state and the federal statutes are that you cannot necessarily regulate amateur radio unless there is a defined aesthetic purpose associated with that. That's what it says. Who knows what a judge is
Where's
going
that?
to take?
Subjective.
Yes, I know.
Okay, I just wanted to say that.
Now, an HOA may have difficulties as well, but I know from a local government standpoint, that's what we're bound to. I'm guessing that you may have further allowance for an HOA to do these types of things.
Yes.
But I would have to look at the Planned Communities Act or something like that, or the HOA would need to do that.
I never knew that power lighting needed to be muffled so that there would be no audible sound detected at the property line. But that's, it doesn't hurt anything. I guess it can stay. Boy, this is a long section.
Yes.
All right, can we move on to temporary uses, 731? Anybody object?
No.
Jerry says, please. One of the temporary uses that I struggle with is yard sales. I also have, I struggle with the term temporary. I know that it's difficult to define temporary, but we don't seem to try to do that with a duration. I don't know that we need to, but their definition says temporary use shall be limited to a use or uses of land, buildings, or structures not intended to be of a permanent duration. That means nothing to me.
Specific uses?
Yes, they did certain days.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah, they did. They,
You can't have a or consecutive.
I was getting ready to ask you, what is the difference between temporary uses? What does Sendai regulate?
Special
Special.
event
Special
uses.
events is a different thing.
Yes,
Isn't it a requirement that somebody has to get a permit to have a yard sale?
Yes.
yes.
Um,
Yard
And in the
sales,
temporary uses, it restricts the number of consecutive days and the number allowed in a year.
How much is that permit?
$5.
and really, it's just a way for us to know that when it's going to go on so the police can drive by and make sure that parking and flow of emergency traffic is not a problem.
Correct.
And they're not
Correct.
doing something that they shouldn't be doing.
Right. And they can't
Add that in
go
now.
buy something from Walmart and put it in their yard and call
Yes.
it a yard sale.
We don't have a definition of yard sale. We mentioned flea markets in a couple locations, but I don't know that there's a definition for flea markets.
That is a good question, Pete, about the yard sale. I have not noticed in here where you do address yard sales. So
Is it in the general code?
Yard sales may be in the general code.
It's probably
I
right
didn't
there
see it
next to
there either. I know that we have in our permit, list of permits and fees,
Mhm.
we list it on there.
And we issue permits for
Yes.
yard sales every day.
And I'd be curious as to how many permits we issue versus how many yard sales there actually are, but that's not for,
That's done on administration side, not planning or inspections.
that's code enforcement. But anyway, temporary uses, I think if you can do your wordsmanship, Wes, on coming up with something that better defines the fact that it is something that is not permanent.
sure.
And I think you're going to have to do that in where you are spelling out the uses. What you're allowing as a temporary
Yep.
is where you're going to have to set
It's in
those
that table?
day regulations.
Is it in that table?
Well, table on 7 is probably where it would be done because that's where we
Yeah.
spell
it-
out
it-
the use
it-
and then the
It
maximum
does,
days.
yeah. On page
Right.
7-33, there's a table there, and it says the use, and it says how long that they can be in place.
I did put a little note on mine.
Okay.
That the second from the bottom one on fairs being only 1 day seems a bit restrictive, but
It says 14 days for annual events.
So a
A
Cinco de
yearly
Mayo
fair.
or
Yeah.
You know, Wes, one of the things that needs to be cleaned up, you might want to circle
but
is
you can have an Antigua Classic car show.
contractors' offices, construction sheds, or
that should've
mobile
been two.
offices during
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
construction. There is other language that is more restrictive that doesn't allow those things.
I know.
So having it in there during construction period only when we don't allow it at all,
Yeah, I know.
it's stuff like that that needs to be cleaned up
Outdoor
throughout
weddings.
this.
That's a good point. Yeah,
You
that's
can
a
have an
very good
outdoor
point.
wedding for 3
I
days.
had missed that.
That's a long wedding.
Wes, is that something that you can address?
Yes, and it was a comment that's been we've put forward before that there's temporary offices, temporary construction trailers. These things are conflicting. They all need to be under one heading.
Our ordinance moves toward the temporary real estate office, moved in one of the units, so like a model home.
Yeah.
That's what it's more geared toward. So to even have that, it's kind of a false hope type thing.
I haven't seen the guy with bicycles up on Old Georgetown Road and 904 in a while.
It's good.
And the guy with the turtles.
It seems like the 3-day outdoor wedding's a bit long.
I started to say, I was like, I need to go back and talk with my wife. We didn't.
May,
talk
may I
about
recommend
wedding.
that the classic car show, the outdoor wedding, and the fair all be limited to 2 days and be consistent, but
Most
So-
of these durations seem
Long.
very
O-
long.
Outdoor wedding one day.
Well,
well,
we got,
days.
I'd be
allow
happy
at least
with
one
making
day
them
per
all,
weather,
those
just in
three,
case.
the fair, the outdoor wedding, and
They
the
have
classic
to
car
set
show,
up-
all 2 days.
Yeah, I think the outdoor wedding it's 3 days to, as Lisa alluded to allow for setup and takedown.
And the tent has to be inspected by the fire department, and
yes.
there's things that have to happen
So
in
you-
advance.
And if you have rehearsal dinner out there on a Friday, wedding Saturday, takedown Sunday.
So this is relative to the tent.
Well, I mean, it's not
Yeah,
necessarily that we're
The structure.
saying that you guys
Yeah.
are going to be going after it for 3 days in a row, on the dance floor. It's just to use the facility,
For the purpose of.
yeah, for the purpose of it.
All right, do we need to,
So are we going to expand fairs to 2 days to make it more consistent, or no? 2 day except 14 days for annual events.
I mean, the tent issue sort of applies to a lot of these things, I guess, but
I'm really confused how a lot of these came up. A circus or a carnival for 14 days?
They're normally here a week. If you go into like the one
And-
in Wilmington, the fair's here for
and we
2
really
weeks.
don't have any areas where they could really utilize except up at Georgetown Road and
Yeah.
904, that big triangular lot. It would be,
In the past, there has been a circus right here at the planetarium before any of that was there, but there has been a circus in Sunset Beach.
Dang, that must have been before my
Wow.
time. Wow. Okay.
okay.
I
Well,
I think
is
they're
there
generous.
Is there a,
well, I
are
guess
we searching for a problem that here, or is it?
And you're not gonna have a fair.
We'll
That's gonna come for 2 days.
we'll address the yard sale
Yes.
in some fashion, likely in here, and we'll just figure out what's in the general code. Probably put it.
Yeah, I think there's something that needs to be in here that a permit's required for a yard
Yep.
sale, so that our fee schedule has something to go back on.
Yep.
All right, non-motorized watercraft rental business. What's the difference between me renting a surfboard and renting a bicycle?
one's in the water, one's on the ground.
Well, that's my point. Why do we need to say watercraft? A non-motorized rental, equipment rental.
So in some, what we'll perhaps do in some retail uses, you may add a supplemental regulation. We can probably add a use in here that relates to, in some communities and other beach communities, we have an item that has retail. It's a retail type use, but it allows for rental of the same items that are being sold. I think that you typically do want to delineate watercraft rental as a separate thing, but I would refer to this as watercraft rental business. And then if it's the position of the town to continue to prohibit motorized, then you would say in the text, non-motorized or or motorized watercraft rental is prohibited.
That's covered in general code
And
under the beach regulations.
yeah,
Okay. Yes, for launching, right.
For regulating for driving speed, launching,
Yeah.
the whole 9 yards.
All right.
So I think we're agreeing on that, so we're gonna allow watercraft device rental, but prohibit all motorized,
that's the way
Correct.
it's been.
because,
So
that's what
jet
exists
skis
on the
are
beach
out.
right now.
right,
And Dave's could certainly rent kayaks if he wanted to. He sells them there.
Sure,
But jet skis are out.
that's been the position.
Well,
Yes.
but they can go for variance. They've done that in the past.
For jet skis,
Yeah.
I would think that would be a use variance, but it'd be up to them to try to request.
Ms. Anglin, didn't we have a Board of Adjustment meeting many years ago where they were going to, from the boat ramp, they were going to have a jet ski rental business? That then,
Was that about the parking though? Because there's no parking on that site.
well, they decided not to bring it before the Board of Adjustment.
Right.
I don't know what the reason was, but so there must be.
They were going to build a pier beside Twin Lakes,
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
and the parking came into play as well as the pier, the use.
and I guess, okay, thinking ahead, because I guess, why do we not want any motorized rentals? Especially thinking ahead that some of these personal watercrafts are probably going to be electric soon.
I think it's more so the business that the town is not looking for, not an actual rental of a jet ski or whatever.
And I guess I'm just going to, are we sure on the why on that?
I can tell you why
Could there
some
be a legal reason
communities
to
don't
involve in
allow
that?
them is because the folks that are renting jet skis, it's typically in the summer.
Mhm.
There's already enough yahoos out there that have boats, and it's I mean, it is a hazard type of issue.
We call them water lice.
I know, but they can.
Yeah, I've got other names.
But obviously they can bring their own, right?
Yeah. Yes, you can bring your
And
own.
we've already had one accident since I've been here.
Right.
So, I mean, I'm not
The-
sure why prohibiting the rental when you can bring your own.
Well, because it's one thing to have your own, but if you add to it another dozen or two, you know,
Many-
that's what you guys can do.
Right.
You,
Well,
you guys
I'm
can
just going
change
to
that.
making sure
Yeah.
we understand the why.
That's the why for why other communities regulate them. But
Some of it
that's
has
up
to
to
do
you
with the
guys.
experience level of the person that is renting versus somebody that owns one, but
Yeah.
that's unstated. It's
Right. I mean, and you don't know. I mean, somebody could bring 2 jet skis with them and bring their cousins with, and they're untrained and they go out there anyway. So, I mean, it doesn't achieve any of that.
is
But-
it a
but
problem that needs fixing?
It's up to you all, however you
What do you think?
No, I was just going to say, I wondered if there would be, if the town gave them a permit to rent the jet skis, and if something horrible happened, is the town going to be held liable also?
that I don't. I mean, you can always be held liable or someone can claim liability, but you know, I don't necessarily believe so.
Well,
We don't do
as-
business license.
Hmm?
We don't do business
Yeah.
license.
Yeah. If,
So we would not be held liable for
Yeah.
a business.
There you go.
All right, so do we in agreement that we can leave it as is
Mhm.
and not address it any more than what Wes had said would be in a one-liner? All right, design criteria for mixed-use districts. Wow.
Yeah.
If I could make a suggestion,
yes.
just to start this, just turn it over to Wes and
Yeah.
and kind of go from there.
something to, I've had individual discussions with Chad about our various mixed-use districts. And we probably need to step back from this temporarily and see what Chad comes up with. Because we could milk this pony for quite a while and not get any milk.
Yeah, I haven't set it up yet, but one of the things Wes and I have talked about and is that we plan on doing is meeting with the stewards to help with the mixed-use district and bringing the standards into this book. They're not there, and
then this would be something that would come before the planning board for our review.
well, it would be,
Recommendations then going on to town council.
yeah, I mean, it would be embedded into this work. We've talked about that in the past. So,
And this has to, for the edification of the planning board, this has to do with the Mud District, which is across the street from us, all the way to Food Line. It has to do with MB2, which we're in the middle of right here. It goes all the way down to the boat ramp or down to the outfitters.
yes.
It has to do with
Outside parts of the ETJ. Parts of the ETJ
Well-
are mixed use.
No,
very small, but yes, you're right. You're
The-
exactly right. It also has to do with the Gateway Overlay project.
yes, this section 733, the way that I read this is if someone came to the town, they said they want to propose a brand new mixed use district, and that's what they would do. It's almost and it's a little bit out of place. It's akin to requiring some type of overlay district, and it'd be sort of like a PUD, but it would be called a mixed use district rather than a planned unit development. And it seems odd to me that it's in here this way. We'll talk about also in the appendix the specific standards, but that's how I read this to be. I don't know that we've had discussions about conditional zoning being an option, and so I think that's really what would replace this. This is as though the Mud District did not exist and someone came and they met
Okay.
these standards to establish it.
All right. And I don't know that we have a 50-acre continuous plot that's available.
100, yeah, 50, yeah, 50, yep.
If I can interject anything, and I know Wes and I have talked about this, it is probably one of my biggest, and I'm talking about one at the top, is moving toward a conditional use, conditional rezoning. It makes it a whole lot easier to do a legislative hearing on rezoning to a specific site plan than having to worry about going through this.
So,
So,
go
yeah,
ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say, explain what that is. So when you go to what Chad just
Conditional
said,
rezoning.
somebody comes up with a plan, complete plan for
Yep.
a thing, a
Yep.
box, and says the spot I want to put it on is currently zoned XYZ,
Yep.
but it doesn't conform to XYZ, but you basically rezone it, the whole plan. Is that my understanding how that would work, or
Yep.
am I off
Yes.
base?
No,
No, that's right.
you're right.
Like
So
a
as opposed to
PUD,
setting this
Yes.
all up, all these rules up in advance,
PRD.
You would have certain stipulations. For
right?
Yeah.
That if somebody wants to propose that, they have to follow these stipulations, and
Yeah.
then who would decide whether that's okay? The
planning
department.
The planning
So
board.
then it would come to us. You guys would do your review and say
Yeah. Then
all these things are
then
done
they have a
correctly.
required public input meeting that they hold with citizens and neighbors before it ever even gets into planning board, and then there's an additional public hearing before the town council for final approval or denial.
So all that be done. The proposal, the department staff would go through it. There'd be public meetings, public input, then planning board.
It is the
And
most.
then if it goes beyond the planning board, there's another public meeting and then council.
It is the most stringent zoning process a developer can go through.
So when it's approved, everybody should be happy
In theory.
if it gets
In
approved.
theory.
Well, that seems like a way to go.
Yes.
And this would include, so for instance, in a development like Sea Trail, if they wanted to convert certain areas for mixed-use development,
Yes.
They could
this
do
would be
that.
the same process, even though that has
I've had conversations with developers. They're very excited about it. It just makes it easier because you can do a rezoning to a specific site plan.
Right, because you're looking
You're-
at the outcome.
You're
Right.
looking, and you're not doing a rezoning for a whole, allow a use
For everywhere.
for everybody.
Mhm.
You do and it's a lot more favorable to boards, planning board, and council because they're seeing the direct result of what's going to come out of this, not just saying, "Hey, we're going to rezone my lot to whatever it is," where they go from being potentially limited to a whole bunch of uses. Well, they can see the exact uses of what you're. If Sea Trail had an MDP, master development plan with conditional rezoning, we would not have. It would be perfect, in theory.
No,
In
it's
theory,
perfect.
Yeah.
but
Better.
Yeah.
right.
Could it be predictable?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, can we
Look,
move,
yeah.
move on and,
Yeah.
So I
with
guess
our
how do we-
process?
So that'd be incorporated as a new section, and some of these other ones would then disappear.
Yes. Like 733
would go
Okay.
by.
would be gone. Yes.
Okay.
PRD would go.
So I
Yeah.
guess do we have to? Are we kind of as a board in agreement with that, or?
Anybody in disagreement with that?
No, I think this is an exciting development. I think this is a better way to.
And we get an opportunity to see what comes back to us from their meetings.
Yeah.
Totally,
Jerry,
totally.
Sybil?
Makes the
I'm,
most
I'm
sense.
good.
All right, okay, moving forward
Great.
to 734, open space requirements for single-family developments. I always get confused with major being 6 or more and 10 lots, and
Yeah, that's,
The other thing that will help, there will be provisions to further separate minor and major site.
that was my 6,
Yeah. We've talked about that.
Yes.
Yeah. This section just needs to go in the subdivision section.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
my only thought was on paragraph B, the 15%
Mm-hmm.
requirement. Would this be a time to consider upping that, or at the end when we read it, I guess upping that
Up to you.
to allow maybe 20% of open space?
15% is a lot. If you're saying the total net area, but you know, you could say 15% of. I mean, yeah, put 20. I think that's fine. I was trying to think about here. There's
Because that's of the total space.
yes, sir.
So would that include retention ponds then?
Well, that's what I was just reading.
Yeah, I see where you're going to on
specifically.
what the definition of
Yeah.
the open space is.
There's typically
My original thought was
So-
of the total.
on under
Yeah.
4. If you look on under 4 on the next page, it cannot include
See it there.
all these things. So basically, wetlands, buffer areas, easements, agriculture, and
Wetlands.
yes,
No.
and so you could add that it would not include stormwater infrastructure and retention.
Ron, are you for stormwater retention ponds being part of
Well,
open space or
kinda-
not?
Well, we've seen before lowering density and increasing more open space and greenlands and stuff. I want to so my initial thought was that 15% wasn't enough. But now I got to take in consideration what are we subtracting from the
A lot.
total
Yeah.
It is
to
quite-
get to that, you know?
Fair amount.
Right.
So are you wanting to
So
strike through the 20 and keep it at 15?
well, I mean, we got to think. I mean, I'm trying to think holistically on the whole thing. Is that if we got a whole chunk of land, building a development on it, and we want a good amount of open space.
Do we have a
If
sense
the ponds come out, if the stormwater stuff doesn't count, then the 15% is probably okay, right?
Okay.
But if they're counted in the open space, then it seems like it should be a higher number because you could have a lot of square footage of that, which is unwalkable on, right? So I guess that's where I'm kind of at the moment, is that the percentage number should be at a percentage number that is walkable on. I don't know why I can't quite describe it right.
Usable. space.
Usable, yeah. People can get to type space. You know,
Do we know the percentage, say, for instance, in Sea Trail?
Not off the top of my head.
what about sanctuary? That's newer. Do we know?
We do. I don't know it off the top of my head. I mean, your newer projects, I would be able to go look back and see the percentages. I mean, all of them meet the standard.
Right.
I will say this. So any new projects, any one that we've looked at over the past year,
I think sanctuary went
subdivision as a
went
whole,
above this, right?
subdivision as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I mean, you're talking about just about every subdivision in this town, roughly, your bigger ones anyway, except for maybe one or two, have golf courses that are counted
Right.
toward that open space as
Got
well.
it.
So
So I guess in my mind, the number should be a good percentage of the usable or walkable area. Whether that 15% number is right, it seems. I guess in my mind, it seems low if you're counting retention ponds and all that.
Yeah,
stuff.
but you can only allow in that 15%, you can only allow 50% of it to be water bodies under D.
See, I mean, it's a mathematical
Yeah,
thing we're
it's-
looking at here.
You get 10%, you don't count for walking trails and other things. You can't count parking spaces if you have a nature trail next to it. Just changing the 20%.
it's huge. It's a lot. I mean,
It's-
it's 5%, but it's huge.
I think that if you were to change it, I would recommend leaving it at 15%, but adding in there that you cannot count stormwater retention
Right.
and infrastructure. That's fairly common. You wouldn't be
Okay.
outside the norm by
That would
doing
give
that.
us more open
It-
space that people can access.
Well, in
Yes,
D
right.
then, in 3D, you'd have to say water bodies do not include stormwater retention ponds.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So we're going to amend D to do not include.
Yeah. Stormwater retention.
Because we have a couple of subdivisions that have come before us here where the detention ponds are the open space.
Their amenities. Yeah.
And they call them amenity ponds.
Right.
Now, is there a standard way to measure? Because stormwater ponds can fluctuate pretty significantly in terms of water level. Is there a standard way to measure those? That
Well, the county regulates that in their, don't
The
they?
county and the state does.
It's probably the mean
In their
between-
stormwater permit,
It's
they have
probably
to
the mean
retain a
between
certain
everything
amount of water.
Again, it goes
One
back
inch rate.
to regulating what state and the county says, more the state than anything else, square footage of those ponds. But also, when these things come in, again, they're worked on by a licensed engineer, where they're stamped. All those numbers are there, and that's what we review it on paper as numbers. I'm not out there with a measuring tape by any means, going out there and measuring those things. So,
and a dipstick, right?
yeah, you're right. No, I'm not.
All right,
So-
can we move on? And I'm looking at the clock here.
15 minutes.
7:35, construction with pile-type foundations.
I don't even know what this is.
That's not-
And it talks about any building erected south of the inland waterway.
It's on the island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we have pile-type foundations on the mainland as well
Yeah, we
in
do.
BE zones.
I have concerns about that being in there. I think it's perhaps okay to be in there, but you could be.
I'd like to see it removed.
Yeah.
I don't want to isolate the island. I'd like to be more considered the flood map.
Yes.
What
That's
dictates
already
the
going to
requirement.
regulate it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So they're allowed in certain flood areas, which includes all the
I mean,
island.
you
I'm
could-
assuming.
to me,
You can have it
Well,
anywhere.
it requires them on the
Requires
island.
it.
You can
What
have-
about in areas that it doesn't require?
You can put
You- you
I would say you can put a piling house anywhere.
Well,
If I was building a house on my land out in the county, I'd want to put a piling house.
But
However,
there's
there's
people in
HOAs
my
and
neighborhood because
POAs.
they are lower than me have to an addition on their house, it has to be up and piling.
This is one of those sections where I don't think we need to get in the business of regulating what type of house somebody can build. Let the
Well,
POAs and
also for
HOAs
commercial
require that.
structures
But
or a
I
hotel
see
or
no
whatever
reason to
else.
have A in there in restricting it to the island, 735A.
Yeah, it should be based on the FEMA map. You're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think this whole section should just be removed.
Yeah.
735.
okay.
Yeah.
What purpose does it serve?
Yeah.
Right.
The floodplain
Yeah.
ordinances govern that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the neighborhoods and the subdivisions that each one of y'all live in, I know have standards on, can I put a piling house here or not? Oh, I've seen
Not
it.
mine.
I've seen it.
We do.
Yeah.
Does Sea Trail have a restriction?
We do. We don't allow
Restriction of what?
Piling houses or not.
because we don't want. We
Because
just
I've
don't
seen
want
some
we
POAs
don't
and
want
HOAs not on
regular
those.
houses, then a piling one, then a bunch of.
Right.
It's uniformity of style.
Yeah, but and that's fine. We're
On
not here to
floodplain.
address that. That's an
Yeah, right.
HOA
Yeah, it's an HOA issue.
situation.
Just-
So it's-
yeah.
Okay, good
But
suggestion.
here's the problem with the
Bit of
HOA
information for me.
is that this is pertinent to Sea Trail. The HOA in a declarant situation, the declarant is not governed by the HOA. They can build anything they want. Sure. And it's been a big issue within Sea Trail. I don't know how we deal with it from this perspective, but
Well, we
I would
don't.
just say that
You don't deal with
We
it.
don't.
I know, but the belief that we can just pass this off to the HOA is maybe somewhat optimistic.
No,
The HOA can be more restrictive than
Yes.
the town, and that's governed by general statute.
Right.
So we need to move on.
Well, no, they're actually less restrictive.
No, more.
no.
No,
It cannot be
no.
less restricted.
In Sea Trail, Riptide went through very areas.
Let's not be specific.
Right?
Let's,
Okay, let's not be specific, but
Let's
they
move
built
on to the
things
next
that were
topic.
out of compliance with the HOA. So the HOA had no ability to say, okay, this is the standard that every homeowner is required to build by, but you, the declarant, are not bound by that. So now you've got,
That's
That's
a
a
civil
civil
matter
matter,
that
yeah,
does not need to be
yeah.
addressed at this level of government. That's a
let's-
civil matter.
I'm going to suggest we move on to 736.
Yeah.
If people
We
are
just
finished
did.
with 735,
Absolutely.
stormwater solutions.
That needs to be moved in.
To me, it seemed to be okay.
Well,
It's-
I mean, Wes has it to move this section into the development standards, which I tend to agree.
Yeah.
All right. That gets us through number, Article 7. We still have close to 15 minutes in our 2-hour self-imposed time limit.
8's relatively short, which will be.
Yeah, this is relatively short, but I bet we don't get through much of it. Non-conforming uses in buildings. To me, this is the most confusing article in our UDO. I see, after trying to go through and read it, why Chad keeps saying, please don't create more non-conforming uses in our amendments because they create nightmares.
Yeah, just don't. I think this is the part where even I want to trust the man to the right of me because I don't. I think it needs to be cleaned up. I think we need to trust his wisdom to clean it up. And it's confusing enough. Some of this stuff that's put in this book in the past is overlooked Article 8 aspects of things. So, and unless, Wes, you have anything else to really kind of go on this, I think it just probably needs to be cleaned up with the rest of the UDO as we go through it, because you can wrap circles around yourself trying to understand a lot of this. Because if I'm not mistaken, a lot of this stuff can be bound by general statute as well.
To a certain degree, with vested rights, but the main thing is just making the language clear, making the clear distinction between what is a non-conforming use and what is really a dimensional non-conformity.
Right.
A non-conforming structure becomes non-conforming because of a dimensional item.
I think, too, we have an obligation to our citizens to provide reasonable amount of time for somebody to rebuild something that is a non-conformancy to to start with, and then something happens. We have a 180-day provision in here that I think is restrictive. It's under 803, non-conforming building containing a non-conforming use.
We changed that, Wes.
No, well, we said in F that you're allowed to rebuild, but non-conforming use. But yeah, I mean, if you want to.
What did we say in F? Because I don't have that in my book here. Did we allow a year?
I got confused. Yeah, when you rebuild, if something happens to your structure, you rebuild, we allowed a year.
Okay.
But it's a very different between the use in a building, like Wes just said. If a building is vacant for 6 months or the use is discontinued for 6 months or 180 days, then that throws it into a different entity. What we did with last year was with if something life safety type event happens, you're not restricted to 180 days to get your house permitted or built back. You have, because there's a lot of things that go in there, especially if it's under an investigation or something like that.
Sure.
Where
Or
a
you're
year
dealing with your
allows
insurance company or.
Yep. Or a year just gives you a lot more time and less stress and a lot more breathable area.
And this just says that you have to get the building permit within
Correct.
180 days.
Okay.
And I'm more okay with that because nowadays it takes people a year just to get the house built with shortages.
But this is really dealing with a non-conforming use, and it's a very isolated event. If a building containing a non-conforming use burned down, really you should say that use that was non-conforming cannot go back in there. But if it's a single family structure or whatever it may be, and it is was built when the setbacks were XYZ, they should be allowed to build back
rebuild
in their same footprint.
in a year.
Yeah, because single family is
we
permitted
say
there
that?
already. Yes. We just say that under F, existing legal non-conforming single family and duplex with maintenance and repair needs may be replaced in the same location with the same footprint in accordance with previously approved site plan or building permit as applicable, same location, same dimensions, or in compliance with the current dimensional.
Forever.
It doesn't have a limitation on it. Basically says that you're allowed to do it.
So that would mean, now if the property is sold, can somebody else come back? Because you don't want to make that property useless.
Yeah, if it's sold, that's fine.
So
We don't regulate ownership, change of ownership,
Okay.
things like that.
because you don't want to make that lot useless.
Sure. Yep.
So it carries with the property. It's attached to the property, the
That's right.
parcel.
Yep.
That makes sense.
All right, maybe this does do what is in the best interests of the existing non-conforming property owners. I wasn't looking at F. I'm looking at it on my screen now. My book is.
803 will be clarified further, but it says, in my comments that we need to provide reference to the single family and duplex exemption to the 50% requirement.
That means partial destruction, then, right?
But basically, if you're a 1 and 2 family dwelling, you're dimensionally non-conforming, you can rebuild back. I don't care, you had a serious mold issue that you had to knock down the house. You had a hurricane, whatever, fire, whatever it was, you can build back in your same. You cannot expand the degree
Right,
of
you
your
can't
non-conforming.
add on to
Right.
that
But
Right.
you can
beyond
go
what
back.
you originally
yeah,
were permitted to do.
yeah, yes,
Like you can't go vertical.
correct.
Let me ask a question. Hopefully you can answer this very quickly by never mind. I was under the impression that if somebody had a mobile home, a manufactured home
Mhm.
on a lot and something happened to it, that there is a manufacturing date deadline or replacement of that home with another manufactured home.
Talking about the age of the mobile home that would be
Yeah, because there's
replacement.
different codes that have
Yeah.
come into play.
Mhm.
160D got rid of that. You can no longer
We can't
regulate.
require that?
You cannot
Yeah.
regulate a home by the age.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
can't do that anymore.
As long as it
160D
meets the
did a
wind
lot of
zone.
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that had been in case law, but it got actually put into the code specifically now.
The way you regulate that now, if it has to meet the wind zone requirements and the foundation setup requirements of the building code.
Okay.
All right.
Article 9.
I'm just going through my notes here. I got more
5
notes here than
minutes.
any place, but I agree, and I'd like to poll the rest of the planning board that this is a very complex article, and we need to put it in Wes's hands to come back to us with something that is clearer.
Which to me begs another question. Are we going to run through the entire UDO and then Wes will provide us edited? Would we be better, because I think, memories are going to grow dim.
Well,
Would we be better to say, okay, let's stop at whatever, Article 9, and review your revisions as
We're
a
going to do the
second
whole
draft?
package.
No,
That
'cause
was
it's
the
gonna-
deal up front.
Overlap things.
yeah, no, we'll go. You'll be given articles much the same as we're going through this that we'll have, and I'll give you a style sheet today that will show you how that draft document will look.
Okay, fine. Very good.
Okay.
And on that same note, the town council approved a set amount of money for a set amount of time. And it's my understanding that you all are behind time. So we've got to figure out how to speed this process up. And putting articles in Wes's hands, such as this one, is the way to speed it up. Because they didn't give the council didn't give the planning board 2 years and $60,000 to have this thing done. They approved 2 years for you and them. So just remember that as you go through this audit and then you go through the editorial, the town council will do the exact same thing. So we've got to figure out how to time manage from here on out.
The letter we were all given at the beginning of all this from Wes, the proposal considered 4 meetings. This is our 5th meeting, I think. 4 meetings to go through everything in one pass, the first pass. So we needed to, that's why I've been kind of rude on occasion with, stating that that's not for discussion here. The staff is putting pressure on us to do with what we need and not anything more than our mandates.
That is not an excuse for us not to go through this and give it its due diligence and respect. So
And maybe we need to lift our time limit and just work at it as hard as we can. And we've said 2 hours, and we could only extend it by everyone agreeing.
y'all put that stipulation on
I-
We
yourself.
put it on
know.
ourselves.
You could also carry a motion, and also depends on Wes's availability. So you could also, make a motion to amend that.
Yeah, I mean, I can go to 12 today.
Let me pose to the planning board, we're within 2 minutes of our 2 hours. I'd like to entertain a motion that we continue on till noontime today.
All in favor? Aye.
I really only
A
have
second,
I really only have to 11:45.
All right.
okay,
Okay,
11:45. Do I have a second, 11:45?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 One
All right.
second. Alan, does that interfere with you? Okay. So
Thank you,
there's 5 articles remaining. Am I right? 9 through 13.
Yes, well, we've got the appendices.
None.
Yeah. So that should be 5.
So are there any of those articles that you could look at and say,
Article 12.
this is over our head, we just need to let Wes do his editorial to this,
I've only
and
gone
then
as
look
far
back
as
at,
10, so
so what are the articles?
Article 9 is,
Landscape.
hold on.
Article 9 is
perf-
performance. Article 10 is landscape and buffering. 11 is sign. 12 is flood damage. That one, we're not making any changes. That's state model code.
Right.
And then
13 is subdivision.
subdivision
regulation.
is 13. And then unfortunately, we have the definitions.
We've been beating definitions pretty
yeah.
down at
A lot of them we've addressed already. So
Should we get the definitions first?
I would love to, but we will have a.
Or at least, not first finished, but first and then,
So let me tell you,
First and last.
because I think this will answer your question. Where we're proposing to have new definitions or revised definitions, you will get those in your. So if Article 1 has a couple of new definitions or modifications to them, you'll have a little sheet with the 5 definition or whatever it is. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay.
because it seems like you got to get those right,
Yep. Well, and
or at least considered
the
right.
definitions will be modified throughout the whole process continuously.
All right, can we proceed with Article 9, performance standards?
Yes.
Is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Yep.
One of the things that I don't want to say confuses me, but I think it's what it should say in performance standards. Isn't this really for commercial? We do integrate into here residential, but when I read a certain part of it, if I'm thinking commercial and residential in the same breath, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question, Pete. I'm recommending that this section per se be retermed to be development standards, and there will be certain things that will be addressed for residential, like stormwater at the lot basis, for example. But a lot of these items are specifically related to non-residential development.
Yes.
Parking facilities, building
Yes.
facade design,
Yes.
things of that nature.
Because if you read it and it talks about roofs, but it doesn't say anything about a
Well, we can't regulate roofs
Residential
for
roof.
residents.
But
Yeah.
it's confusing. It's okay. So
And
you're
remember-
already aware of that.
Remember, guys, I mean, I feel like you guys have got rightfully so, you feel like you've got a big weight on your shoulders. Remember, there is a UDO administrator to administer these things, and you do have me who you've hired to write it. So don't feel like you have to, you guys are an advisory group. You don't feel like you should feel responsible with
Under
writing it.
901 purpose, housekeeping, but we talk about in the establishment and preservation of architectural character throughout the town. I don't know that we can really say throughout the town. We have the right to say within a zoning district, but we can't morph one zone into another and then make a restriction for development. Within an area, you're allowed to develop it under certain standards. But I'd just like to replace the word town with a zoning district.
With the what? Replace it with what?
With the word, you see where the word town
I
is?
do, yeah.
Cross town out and write throughout a zoning district.
But it could be multiple zoning.
It is multiple zoning districts.
Yeah, and I think it is a town. I think we want our town to have a cohesive look. I mean, we allow the builders, I think, a lot of room to come up with their designs and all, but I think we want our town to be a town, not be individual.
I agree. However, do we have the right to tell somebody, because they are on the end of a zoning district where a new zoning district starts, that they have to meld into the new zoning district?
Well, yes. I mean, you can have overarching, and I guess I was chuckling at the preserving the architectural character of the town. The town hasn't been around that long enough to actually have any
We
architectural
don't have a historic
character.
district.
But yes, for every certain types of uses, or you can have similar standards, whether or not they're in the MB1 or the MB2. So I think it's fine for that language to be there. However, you guys can change it.
Because we had talked about like,
At your
taking the
discretion.
architectural guidelines currently in the overlay district and apply that to all
That's what we've got.
business
mentioned here.
districts.
Mhm.
So that would be town is okay, I guess, in my mind, or
All right, I'll back off
Right.
my question.
Yeah, I
What
think I see
Snibbles
the
did
problem
makes
you're
sense
trying to
sense.
solve, but that it's opens up another issue if you use that term.
And
One thing I noticed under, well, we were calling it performance standards, we'll call it development standards. There was nothing in here about sidewalks. And
Mhm.
I think in the past, we've
Those will
allowed
come
the
in.
municipal code to govern that.
Those,
Can we
that
add it
will
here?
be in here.
All right,
Yes,
so
sir.
we'll
Yeah.
add something for sidewalks.
Yes.
Good. Um, is there a difference between industrial and commercial? And I say that when it comes to 9.03, D as in David.
9.03. 9.03D. Yes. You do have industrial uses. Frankly, I tend to shy away from regulating industrial uses. The look of the look of the building. It's unlikely that you guys are going to have any industrial uses. You may have some flex space or warehouse space at some point in time. So I guess from that standpoint, you may want to keep this here. We are seeing a lot of additional interest and investment coming into industrial type uses, but not in places like Sunset Beach. It's in rural locations or in industrial parks proper.
on that D3, so on industrial buildings, should we have one? We're allowing flat roofs, right?
In this, it says you are.
But we don't address anywhere we talked
Flat
about
roofs are prohibited on multifamily, and I believe
Right.
on
but
on
we
non-residential
don't address
buildings.
how that should be made, huh?
Well, it's flat roof with a parapet, so
Yeah.
you can't see it.
But that's
So it's-
not. It seems to me that there's something there should be talking about wind anchored membrane roof, because that would be the state of the art of making one now.
Are you talking about the building code requirements?
Yeah.
We're talking about design requirements.
Okay, so I'm in the wrong place with.
Well,
If you allow a flat roof, it should be made to the.
it would make it would
I mean,
be,
it would no longer be hot tar over felt.
it
It
would
would be burned on anchored membrane.
sure, but that's all going
So
to be
that's
addressed.
somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay.
That the inspector would look at those plans and make sure that they're meeting all those code requirements. This is from a visual aspect.
Right. So we'll
Despite
allow a flat
whatever
roof for the
material-
parapet, and
Yeah.
someplace else it says you got to use a
Yes.
burnt on membrane
would be-
anchored.
That would be down the hall in Carrie's office.
Right.
And we've really already addressed B3, 903 B3, when it comes to interconnectivity and
Right.
through streets.
We went through all that.
The big picture question I had is we've got the Gateway Overlay District. Really these two sections need to be consolidated, and we had spoken about perhaps applying some of those Gateway Overlay District requirements throughout the entire jurisdiction and rescinding the overlay district itself. Correct?
Generally, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Make all.
We
the
haven't done
business
any
districts the
details
same.
of it, like how much of it would,
Right.
because a lot of it's not applicable to the whole town.
That's right. And so, yes, the island may need to be separated out, but there'd be certain perhaps zoning districts. But if you allow me, I will put together something that tries to pull those two together.
Okay, this would be under 903.
Yes. 903 and 904.
Yes. Okay,
903. Yep. Okay.
What's the weird? You made a note here on the number of units. I
Yes.
guess. Make sure that's on C. Is that consider requiring multifamily?
Yeah.
That's 10 or more rather than 4 provided in there. This is describing the external.
hmm This would be whether or not, someone was building a quadplex, or I guess if they were building an 8-unit, they'd be subject to those requirements.
Because right now, anything more than 3 is multifamily, right?
And per this, 4 or more units would be applicable to the design requirements. But I think based on where my understanding of where you all want to be, I think you do probably want to regulate 4 or more units building design standards.
as opposed to 3 or more.
Well, you're currently regulating it as 4 or more units. Per this, under C on 9-4.
That confused me.
This would be the more specific standard. Multifamily is technically defined as a 3 or more unit use attached, but to trigger having to comply with the building design standards, at present, you have to have a 4 or more unit. So if someone built a 3-unit triplex, they don't have to comply with the building design standards.
Okay.
Does that seem reasonable to you?
That's why I suggested it, perhaps increasing the number. Yeah,
Or something.
Something a little bit higher, but that's
Why don't you do that? And
okay.
anybody have any heartburn with
No.
him having what a license to?
So what are we're adjusting the number of units.
To 8 or more?
Mm-hmm.
To how much?
8 or more.
8 or more.
And that is in the multifamily C.
See?
Yeah. So basically, C applies to 8 or more instead of 4 or more. Right?
Yes, sir.
That's what he's suggesting, yes. Oh, 4. The technical review procedure, I never really thought of that as dealing with architectural requirements, but I guess that's the town staff's, the planning department's participation in that TRC process, along with fire and DPW and police. It didn't jump out like that. Okay.
Yeah.
905, I don't care for including natural vegetation in there as part of the screening for garbage dumpsters. Because that is like, what does that mean? A couple of bushes?
Well, if you can call it like a living wall or something, I could buy it.
I'd
but-
take that out. Just make them put up a screen, a wall. If they want to put some vegetation in front of the wall to make it look nicer, that so be it. But I mean, you could have a wall and then a tree dies. Does that mean? I mean, to me, vegetation doesn't properly enclose a dumpster.
Would you
real-
be happy with landscaping?
Well,
No.
we can that's fine. It can go. Just trying to see.
Because it says there, such screening may consist of.
Yep.
And I'm fine with everything else.
Mhm.
I guess berm maybe covers
Yep.
what you're saying.
Yep.
But just saying natural vegetation, I think that opens it for,
Weeds.
well, yeah, a bunch of grasses, is that enough? Or
Yep.
Well, that's why I was going to say,
Right.
landscaping. Landscape
when even
structure.
berm, I guess, should be of maybe a certain height even to block it or whatever. But
What do you have against dandelion?
what's that?
What do you have against dandelion?
Yeah, well, a lot actually. But I mean, it just seems
Yeah.
like I don't know how you would judge that. The guy puts his dumpsters out and he puts a few bushes around.
Sure.
Is that really enclosing it or not? He can
Yep.
say, yeah, well, there's natural vegetation.
I mean,
there.
Well,
think-
you take away the natural vegetation because if fences are allowed and somebody could come in and petition for a living fence, in which we would probably approve. So, but it would be a
Right.
site-specific kind of thing.
Exactly, that's fine. I guess, but
All right.
All right, we're through that parking. The use of parking facilities, 908.
Mhm.
907E. I never thought of a parking lot as having a purpose to reduce wind and air turbulence and heat and noise glare, but the landscaping buffers within a parking lot are what do that, not
Yes.
the parking lot. The parking lot creates the problem.
Yep.
But again, that's just,
Yes.
I don't know. The use of a parking lot. For the intermittent parking of a licensed motor vehicle, wouldn't it be registered motor vehicle? I don't know what the word licensed means, but properly registered vehicle.
Yep.
good point. That's
We also, in a
Good
parking
point.
lot, of course, maybe there's another, you tell me if there's another ordinance that prohibits this. But we'll go back to, if I drive my car to the Food Lion parking lot and put a for sale sign on it, am I allowed to do that? Or does Food Lion have to tell me I can't do it?
You would not be allowed to do that because it's saying that you need to be per A1. Basically, if you're an employee, occupant, owner, tenant, or customer utilizing the building served. So in that case, you're using that as a for sale lot.
And I'm allowed to have a for sale sign on my car as I drive
Sure.
around town.
But yeah,
All right, never mind that.
Yeah, but to help you out with that, Food Line is allowed to put no overnight parking, towing signs around their facility that further kind of prohibits that.
and it says in
Right.
2 that
Right.
also you can't do that.
All right.
Do they?
yeah, that's there. It's not
Yeah,
a big sign.
that's
is
it.
it? Okay.
I'll bring up a point. Is a restaurant in our town allowed to set tables up in a parking space?
Not
Even if there's an abundance of parking spaces?
not at present.
COVID.
COVID allowed
Now
that?
that's true. There was a
State.
State of emergency situation.
Variance.
Okay.
yeah.
Never mind then. We don't need to waste time on
No,
that.
that's
for
where
me.
that came from. That's where that
Yeah.
stemmed from. That's where a lot of this creativity. I don't.
The
At least are
outdoor-
we still under state of emergency in the whole
It's
entire
been
state?
rescinded, I thought.
The town's not. I don't know
Towns,
if it's
the
state.
state.
It was lifted.
I thought it
They
was
were
lifted too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes. On 909 for off-street parking space requirements, in the last sentence of A, we say such parking spaces may be provided in a parking garage or in a graded open area. I'd feel a lot more comfortable if it was a properly stabilized area and they can't just point to a field that when it rains, the cars get bogged down.
Well, there is a requirement depending on the number of spaces you're
I
providing
think it's 5 spaces.
that you have to have yeah, 5 or more shall provide dust proof with adequate drainage.
Right.
And so where exactly were you referring to there?
909A.
The last sentence.
The last sentence.
Such parking spaces may be provided in parking garage or
Or in a graded open area.
Okay.
To me, if you're asking somebody in a commercial facility, your customers to park, it does need to be properly stabilized for vehicular traffic.
Yeah, I almost think that that sentence should go because we talk about what's required specifically for the
You want to put it on the 5 more spaces, dustproof?
Yeah, because I don't want someone to conflate that. Now, we would say that the more stringent shall apply, but that sentence could probably
And
go.
on that diagram where it shows the asphalt and then parentheses dustproof surface, it's implying that asphalt is a dustproof surface, which it is, but it's not. It should really say or dust because you can make a gravel parking lot.
Yes,
It
that's
doesn't
right.
have to be asphalt. It
doesn't
have to be macadam.
That's right. And that's how we regulate it.
Okay.
You know, we behind the scenes, there's all these questions that are being volleyed to staff.
Your point about removing the employee requirement or staff requirement, I think is a good one.
Well, when we went through parking earlier years ago, I mean, we talked about this. That might have been one of the changes, but anyway. So what you're saying here, you can't make any allowance for employee parking, or you can't do it the way it's worded.
So
Your dot there, consider removing.
because it's how many employees you're running a business, how many employees are you having in the season, in the off season, tomorrow, next week? I mean, that's a moving target.
Okay.
Not only that, so if we're asked someone volleys a complaint to Chad and says, I think that their parking is they don't have enough parking. Chad then has to go to that business owner. How many employees do you have? I mean, we could dig into it and eventually figure it out, but it's not a very effective means of requiring.
But you could have some businesses with a lot of employees.
You have some business with a lot of employees.
So, I mean, when we did this last time, or we did this table or whatever it was, probably I guess in 2017 or so, talked about employees and kicked that around quite a bit, trying to come up with a way of doing it. So we just have that you have to allow X number of spaces for employees, period. 2, 3, 4, whatever the number would be.
And then the real and true issue is when that business closes and say they've got 3 employees, someone else comes in and they maybe have 12 or 15 employees. Are we then going to say that they cannot occupy that business because they don't have enough parking for their employees? We want to regulate based on the square footage of the structure when it's built.
Yeah.
And hopefully allow for a turnover of different types of uses, so long as we don't create a big issue.
Also, with our re-looking at our business areas too, we're going to have a lot of combined strip areas that have multiple businesses in them, and each one of them is going to have its own formula, if you will, for parking.
Yep.
That also needs to be evaluated.
Shopping center, yes.
It's
Where this gets really problematic, and I'm not picking on the entity of religious entities, is that if you have one place that you regulate it, hey, I have 3 employees, and you do the parking on 3 employees, and the next thing you know, you have a church going into a strip mall, which is becoming very, very more popular. The influx of the people in that church during the times of Sunday and Wednesday between 3 hours, you're never going to have enough parking. So doing the parking based on the square footage is where you really start hitting on better parking numbers.
Ron, what do you think about removing the employee parking requirements? So you don't seem to be comfortable with that, but you have a history,
Well, when we did it last time, we tried to make the whole parking thing less restrictive. I'm inferring from Chad and Wester that we missed the target, I guess, because it was worse before, bringing down these numbers, and we tried to bring down the numbers on how many, making sure there was enough spots, and that's how we did kick around this employee thing quite a bit. So apparently we just missed the target on how to do it. So yeah, we did look at it that's why you have things on seats, right, that you don't like somewhere else. Because you have square footage and you could have either a lot of seats.
It's much harder to modify the square
Right.
footage than it is to bring in seats, change your employees, whatever it may be.
Right.
Okay.
So
I
really,
guess.
you're recommending we trash everything Remove everything that's based on trying to anticipate the number of people and cars and just go by square footage of the business itself.
That way it's more uniform, allows for changeover. In my professional opinion, we overregulate parking. I think that if a business is willing to invest and take a risk, they're not going to operate in a place that they don't necessarily believe has enough parking. And so I feel like we get in the way a lot of times of these things. And I can tell you from experience, I don't know how many businesses, based on an ordinance requirement for parking, that we've said, sorry, you can't come in here. And I think that's
right, because that was
problematic.
true. This is why we took it on way back
Yeah.
when. Well, I'll move on here shortly. It's still true, you're saying? Even with this latest, the way it is now, it's still true. We're turning away businesses because they're not meeting the parking.
I mean, it's from what I've been told. I mean, from what I've dealt with,
They're having trouble attracting businesses because of our parking.
I'll give you an example, and this one's coming up in 2 weeks, is the dental office expansion. Our requirements didn't allowed him at a minimum of 9 parking spaces because of the square footage of the building needed.
This parking lot is never full.
Correct. So
precisely.
So that's the reason why, you're regulating it based on employees. Well, his additional parking spaces that on the addition that he's at won't even cover his staff, much less the excess number of clientele that he's bringing in. So he actually proposed 30 more spaces than he was required to. So because if we'd have done it more on the square footage of the building, you probably get better parking numbers.
Well, but it goes back to what I was telling you. Let the business owner or so
get rid
decide.
of the whole thing.
I would, but we have not.
And say,
So here's what we do.
You design our parking spots that are adequate for your business.
Here's what we have done in a lot of local governments of recent. We've said that if it is a change of use, so long as you're not going from a non-residential to a residential use, no additional parking is required, period.
In a change.
And a change of use. Now, if you expand the square footage of that structure, you're responsible only for the expansion of that parking, whatever it would be. And so from that standpoint, there is never an issue for parking if someone wants to go into a vacant storefront for whatever use.
And do we have that now? No.
Don't. That would be my recommendation, but
Let's see what that looks like.
And we were also concerned about over parking too, like what we have here. I mean, you have tear down Paradise and put up a parking lot.
Now you can do that too. You can put in stipulations that limit over parking as well.
Well, it does.
Yes, and I believe you do have that in place here.
And I thought we had some pluses or minuses on what they can
On
allow, right?
page 9-12 under E.
Right.
Yep. All right. So I will add the change of use, no new parking required, except for expansion. Okay.
When it comes, can we move?
Yep.
When it comes to loading spaces, I did not see any issues with it, but I don't know that it is our place, unless you're talking about emergency traffic or blocking traffic, to regulate loading.
I agree. I recommend that be taken out. I think that should be up to the business owner, and they can figure out if they don't put one in, that when they get the trucks there in the middle of the night or whenever it is, so they're not blocking traffic. That'd be a police matter.
Mm-hmm.
So 9:14.
Chad, is that okay with you?
This is 9:13.
9:13. Yeah, 9:13 and 9:14.
Yes. Outdoor lighting. Again, we have temporary event, which I guess we've put some arms around that, depending on the type of event. My neighbor has a light controlled with activated by motion, except it doesn't work, so it stays on all night. I'd like to see activated by properly functioning motion sensor device.
Well, but that's he just. I mean, I guess you could submit a complaint to the town, but
I just unscrew his light bulb.
or just unscrew his light bulb. But we do. That's exempt per residential security lights controlled and activated by a motion sensor.
What is
But
it?
I'm just saying it should be exempt, but it needs to be properly functioning.
Which one we're looking at?
Unless you're going to fall back on 917
Yep.
A3. But I guess it does say for a duration of 15 minutes or less. Maybe I could complain if it stays on for long, for 15 minutes.
And is there some, I mean, some consideration for where that light covers? I mean,
Not if it's motion detected and activated.
because I see in some of the residences, these motion lights come on and they spread light on the neighboring homes.
Sure.
I mean, misaimed.
Residential lights are much more difficult. I was trying to see if we had a.
Well, they check to see it's on a motion detector, but I don't think they look at the aiming because it's not on during the day.
True. And is this just commercial? Or is this residential and commercial?
It's
A3 is
primarily
residential.
commercial,
Okay.
Well, A3 is residential.
but yes. Let me see here.
I think it just needs to say something that, light must be secured in such a way that the majority of its focus is on the property to which it is attached.
It's really tough. The issue that you run into in particular are floodlights along driveways, things like that, that they're primarily directed to that driveway, but oftentimes the driveway may be adjacent to that property line. And that's where we have trouble with these.
Do we get many complaints from people about this?
I think we're dealing with one right now, but other than that, in my year and a half I've been
So
here.
it's not a big deal
No.
yet, or now. It isn't.
Do you think we need to change something, or what do you?
Haven't dealt with it a lot.
Well, how about if we say,
Your bigger issue, I think, comes with lighting front, which I think we already have provisions for this, is your motion front lighting as far as
That's in there.
you can say properly functioning and properly directed motion sensor devices. I mean, I think you can wordsmanship in there,
Okay.
add the word properly directed.
it becomes, in my experience, it becomes difficulty enforcing, because you get into how do you measure the illumination and all this stuff. It becomes subjectable.
Well, yeah, but if somebody has it for their driveway, it needs to be focused on their driveway. If that's what they say,
Mhm.
why do you have this? Well, when I pull into my driveway. Well, aim it at your driveway then.
Now, and,
Some,
and,
some,
and
some things are not governmental issues.
I don't want to defer on
If,
this, but
if your garage light happens to be shining in someone's living room, the person in the living room should be able to knock on your door and say, "Excuse me, sir, would you mind
yes,
putting
that
that
would
down
be great.
just a bit?" And the
Yeah.
person go, "Yes, I can do that for you,"
Do you
without
got-
government getting involved.
That would be
If that was the
preferable.
case, I'd have a lot more free time.
Yeah. Yes.
Jesus, I mean, some
You would not imagine the amount of
Yeah.
time that we and deal with.
All right,
with
well,
neighborly
let's
issues.
take what Ron said under advisement and move forward. Let me go to 917 exempt number 7. Open flames are prohibited unless they're 10 foot away from a structure and not underneath a deck. I would not want to see somebody taking a kerosene lantern and driving a nail in the side of their house and hanging it from it. I'd be more comfortable if 917A7 also said in accordance with Municipal Code 92.41.
Okay.
92.1.
There's
0.41.
basically a 10-foot separation requirement from the
From the
structure.
structure, and it cannot be underneath an overhanging deck or part of the
92.41.
structure.
9.
92.41. It's called open flames.
Right.
Is the section. One of the things that we don't, that we're silent on, we talk about heights of street lights and parking lot lighting, 40 foot and 25 foot.
Mhm.
But what we don't talk about is a process that citizens can go through to get additional lighting added by the town on streets.
That would, I believe you do have that in your general code, but that would be, that would be a general code item.
We have a
Petitioning-
process. If somebody comes into Sendai and says, I'd like to have a street light added to the pole out in front of my house,
Mhm.
there's a process that they have to go through, and really they go to Dustin.
Yep.
And Dustin then decides
Yep.
if they need it or not. With dark sky,
On a public street, you mean? I mean,
on a
so-
public, yes.
But the street light addition would be outside of the UDO because you're not necessarily regulating something. It's already a street that's there. The time to put it in is when the street's installed. It's after the fact, and it's a problem in a lot of our local governments. They have specific rules for how a neighborhood can petition the town for the installation of street lights, whether there's a fee assessed on them, or it just so happens that the town has a capital item that can help a certain amount of streets per year, but that would be a municipal code
And if
item.
they're private streets, they probably go into a whole nother different standard of it becomes up to
The HOA.
the HOA.
Yeah,
Yep.
BMC just does that.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
they do it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we got ours. You just call them up and ask them to add a light.
You know they charge you for it.
$17 a month.
The 921 light trespass really covers what Ron was just talking about any outdoor lighting. It must be angled so that it does not cast direct light or glare on abutting residential use property. So it's that.
Where
you
was
can
that?
921 light trespass.
Except you've got here that 917 are the exemptions from the requirements of this section.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's
On 9, sorry, let me make you back up for a second. On 919, this whole lighting, I got myself in the weeds here on figuring, and 9 and 20 on what these, all this stuff on lumens and,
foot
don't,
candles.
in reality, well, first of all, incandescent is mentioned someplace here in C1 maybe. So that should probably be out now, right? Yeah. On page 924,
Yes.
C1 incandescents allowed
Mm-hmm.
or preferred, and that should probably be out now.
Yep.
Since I'm not sure about those other ones. Sodium, that metal hydride, that sodium lights, right? Is metal hydride. But anyway, in reality, the way this works on these available, we just rely on BEMC to do this whole thing and approve it.
Yeah.
Have we talked to those people, looked at any of this stuff and said that this is appropriate, especially when you get into the engineering numbers there, like in the table?
At
What's
some,
the maximum, minimum number of foot candles allowed? And
so there are lighting plans that are required, and that we do stipulate the foot candle levels, and this is primarily, if we're going to be a new construction project or whatever it may be. A long time ago, we did have Brunswick Electric here when we were doing the Gateway Overlay District, but this is probably something that we should send to them and make sure it's
Right, it seems like in
accord.
real life what we've
Yeah.
been doing, we all say, has BEMC done a lighting plan? And we talked about the guy that does it and go, okay, that's good with us.
Yeah, but so
should
what
we have
happens
him then look at this or look at our standards and say, yes, this agrees to what the state of the art that what we're doing now?
No.
Met with him. I met him and met with him.
Clayton?
Yeah, Clayton.
Yep.
When we did the parking lot over here.
Yep.
And he seemed to be pretty knowledgeable of.
He has worked with the planning board before.
Yeah.
Yes,
And he
It's
really does seem to be quite knowledgeable.
he is, and he
And-
also designs them. I mean, basically, they're the same lights that's installed in the mixed-use district, which I think is our most restrictive lighting district
Yes.
as well.
So he's designing light plans to our standard?
Yeah. I mean, he's
And
very.
he says our standard is,
I don't know. I have to.
Well, he
Chad-
doesn't even talk in foot candles anymore. They talk in.
It's all
lumens.
LED.
well, lumen,
Yeah.
1 foot candle is a lumen 1 foot
Yeah.
away from the.
Could you send? Do you think you could send him
Okay.
its illumination levels and just make sure
I,
that?
I like what Ron said. Let's get
Yeah.
BEMC
Yeah.
to have some input into the lighting portion of Article 9.
And the other thing is, you can get a meter. A lot of towns do have meters, so that if someone were to say that light's too bright, then they would go out and stand at the property line with a meter to see actually what the level.
Don't you just
was
hold the
reading.
turtle up there?
It all puts his head in, he goes, too bright. Well, I guess my point is, I would like, since we seem to be relying on the electric company to providing
Yep.
proper light ban, is coordinate with the electric company during this rewrite that we are creating standards that are state-of-the-art, reasonable,
Sure.
effective, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that we just need to take some of these items out and just
Right.
say that it needs to be in accord with the
Electric
utility.
utility, right.
Yeah.
All right, does that take us all the way through 921 so far? I'm not
believe
trying
so.
to,
Yeah.
I know we're getting
because
close.
we're almost finished with Article 9.
Mhm.
I don't know that we need to step on the sea turtle protection unless we want to have Carmel Zetz look at this, but that may be opening up.
I believe this is, a
All right.
oft-debated subject.
All right, so we're done with Article 9. Well, we've got 2 minutes.
Can I take up those 2 minutes?
Huh?
Please.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And I've got something to hand out to him too, but go ahead.
Yeah. So, just to let you know, we will have a regular planning board meeting on June the 2nd.
Yes.
All right.
And there won't be any room for the
There will
UDO.
not. You'll have a full load. I'm looking at five cases that will be coming to you. A final plat, 2 final plats, a major site development expansion, and 2 text amendments. So that leaves us with our next UDO meeting being on our regular schedule, June the 16th with West. So just to let you know, we'll only have
Thank you.
one of these in one of these in June,
Oh,
not 2.
hot dog.
Okay.
So
So-
where we started earlier this morning is the timeline. So at some point here, should we look at a revised timeline? When
So
we get through at least this first,
Yeah, because I'll have to say, I thought in the beginning, we were told,
So-
we're going to have to go over this several times.
we are.
And
Well,
now
this-
all of a
this letter
sudden,
was very clear, though,
So-
about the first pass that we're
And,
going to do now.
let me clear it up. The audit process, the kickoff was in January, and we did a meeting in January. And then the audit was supposed to last from February to June. So by the end of June, we were supposed to be done with the audit. And then in August, start
Which we're
going.
pretty close.
We are.
But didn't it say 4 meetings?
I believe so. And I'd have to go back and pull it. But
But through June 22, I would say
we're pretty close
We're
to
pretty-
be. We may be 1 meeting off.
Yeah.
Or 1 month off, but yeah.
so. I would need to get into where we're going to get into that specifically, Ron, is on the back end of this when we're probably at a council level of it leading past December 2023 and into 2024. So,
Well, I guess all I'm saying is maybe when we get to the end of the audit is review and update the total timeline so everybody knows what
Yep.
it is. And if it is going over,
yep.
so be it.
Yep.
It is what it is. So we got in my mind, no whining at the end.
These things go over. This document just gives you an example of what the draft will look like. It shows you in the very top there the editorial format that will be used, where language is recommended. It's going to be underlined. Where you're striking through something will be stricken through that way. And obviously, we're not going to pull over whole sections that we've said that we're going to delete. They just will never be pulled over. But where we're taking existing language and modifying it, there'll be strike through in there. Does that make sense?
Will you say if a whole article, if a whole section is taken out, can you still list it and then say taken out, or is that too complicated?
It's too complicated. But that's part of the reason why we're doing this audit
Just could
process.
throw off the numbering system and everything
Yes,
else too.
because
Is there a way to have that on a separate list?
I will have a document that has everything from your existing UDO that's kept or whatever. And remember, we're going through the audit precisely for that reason.
Right.
So that you're not just getting a fresh draft.
Okay. I think I've informed the board I will not be here for the June 2nd meeting, unfortunately. So.
Right.
We'll have
That's
four.
all I have. Thank
Will
you.
everybody else be here June 2nd?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I'd still love to review the
Oh, you'll get
The
your
submission,
packet.
so.
Yeah.
great.
Would you like for me to make a move
I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the
to
meeting.
adjourn? I so move.
Okay, do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is so adjourned.